We are live on a Sports Bash Wednesday, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. What's up, everybody? Beautiful day. Nice and warm out there. Get you ready for a nice little Wednesday. What can the Eagles do to top what they did yesterday? Hey, Saquon Barkley, here's a bag of money. He got paid. A lot of people texting in about the Barkley move yesterday. Want to get your reaction again today as the dust has settled on Saquon Barkley getting the 2-year extension. You feeling okay about it? I was surprised. A lot of people yesterday did have questions about it, which I think were fair. I think they were rational questions that should have been asked, and I definitely understand the questions. We'll get into the questions and the answers and more. Sports Bash Football at 4. Geoff Mosher today will give us more insight on why the deal, what it means, what did it free up. That's all coming up 4 o'clock today, Football at 4. A couple other things before we dive into the Barkley deal and why the Eagles did it and why it's a really, really interesting move and what we'll talk about moving forward. Phillies, they're in action today. You've got the Phillies down in Clearwater continuing spring training. We're going to get some news and notes on the Phils with Todd Zolecki today at 3 o'clock, who, longtime Phillies guy. Some of the storylines down there that are emerging. One storyline might not emerge to start the season, but it could be something that we have to keep an eye on maybe at the deadline. And that is Bryce Harper, who apparently told Ken Rosenthal that he would be interested, or he not interested, he would have no problem moving back to the outfield if the Phillies could get a first baseman that was an impactful bat in the lineup. Did anybody realize that Vlad Guerrero Jr. is a free agent? Keep that in mind. We'll talk to Todd Zolecki at 3 o'clock today. Mike McGarry coming up at the bottom of the hour. Flyers today, they lost last night. That game was wild, right? 4-2, first period, back and forth they go. I mean, they're down. They look like they're out of it. They look like they have no pulse. They get back in the game a little bit. But we're going to talk to Kecin Durso coming up at 3:30 today with the latest on the deadline, which is Friday. So the Flyers are essentially, they got one game left on Thursday night to find out if they're in this thing or they're out of this thing. They're 4 points out, right? They're 4 points out of a playoff spot. They're not going to make a trade to help them, but will they make a trade to hurt them? We'll talk to Durso at 3:30 today. Sixers lost last night. That's all I got for you there. All right, let's get into the Barkley stuff, okay? I'm still very intrigued by this. So when I'm intrigued by stuff like this, I listen to my guy Andrew Brandt, former NFL front office executive, and I like Andrew Brandt's perspectives because his perspective comes from both sides. He has been a NFL front office guy. He has also been an agent. So he has been on both sides of the negotiating table here. So why does Andrew Brandt like this move for Philadelphia?
Barkley before this, and I'm going to say even with the new standard that's going to be set by wide receivers over 33, 34 million a year, is a bargain for the Eagles because even if it's towards 20 million a year, look at that compared to these receivers. There are something like 20-something receivers making over 20 million a year. Barkley is more valuable than any of them.
So he's essentially saying, and this is a totally interesting conversation that I think we can get into a little bit deeper. He is basically saying you wouldn't have a problem paying a wide receiver that kind of money. So why would you have a problem paying your best offensive weapon that kind of money? So much we are so tied into this is what you pay this position. This is what you pay this position. And we don't go outside of that box. But he's saying if you're willing to pay a wide receiver $30 million, why wouldn't you pay this guy that money when he is the equivalent, if not more valuable than a wide receiver? That sets up a whole other conversation that we can get into in just a second here. But Andrew Brandt went on to say that he is essentially more valuable than a wide receiver.
There will be 3 receivers making over 30 a year: Jefferson, Lamb, and to be Chase. And we can argue whether Saquon Barkley is more valuable than them. So at the most, he's going to make 20 million. Now I see something about 36 million guaranteed, which tells me he's going to be about 18 a year the next 2 years instead of 13 a year. That's just my guess.
Well, is he more valuable than those two guys? He won a Super Bowl. Those two guys have not. Jefferson nor Jamar Chase. They're great players. But if you had the opportunity to pay one guy, are you paying Saquon Barkley, or are you paying Justin Jefferson, or are you paying Jamar Chase? Which guy would you pay the money to? 609-403-0973. It brings up an interesting topic of conversation that ESPN NFL columnist Kevin Clark, I always like Kevin Clark's work. He was on Unsportsmanlike, and he says something about NFL fans and front offices. They are too focused on something.
We have a proof of concept of what the Eagles look like without Saquon Barkley. When everybody wanted to fire Nick Sirianni, including me, Saquon changed the entire franchise. And we get so wrapped up in positional value. The Eagles don't care. The Lions don't care. Like, they'll go out and spend real resources on a running back because they understand how teams are built. The Eagles understand how to build a team.
Eagles don't care. Lions don't care. They were the 2 best teams in the NFC this year. They put positional value on running back, and other teams have overlooked that position. Now, I don't think it's fair to say they're the only 2, because why? Green Bay, they went out and signed Josh Jacobs this offseason. Other teams did put some money into the running back position. That's why last year I thought the free agent period, Baltimore, they brought in King Henry. The best teams in football last year went out this offseason and added running backs. Is the running game becoming cool again? Is the running back becoming cool again? And our teams now, are we going to start to see running backs drafted in the top 5, running backs drafted in the top 10? You know, it wasn't too long ago where Eagles fans wanted Ricky Williams with the 2nd overall pick in the draft. Do you remember that? Can you imagine now? By the way, the New York Football Giants took a running back with the 2nd pick in the draft, and they got blasted for it at the time. That guy's name was Saquon Barkley. They got criticized for, you don't draft a running back at number 2. So did the Giants actually do the right thing? They just never did anything around Saquon Barkley. The Eagles did it the opposite way, though. They built everything up and then popped Barkley in to the puzzle, right? The puzzle was already pretty much finished. They just had to get that last piece and then pop it in to finish. The Giants tried to get the last piece first, and then they could never build around Saquon Barkley. But could this contract and could this signing last year, going out on the free agent market and spending money to get Saquon Barkley, followed by a 2,000-yard season, culminating with a Super Bowl, and now expanding to a 2-year deal that got him $41 million extra dollars? Are we back in the era of the running back? You heard what Andrew Brandt said. I think Kevin Clark brings up an interesting point, because I think it's going to have a conversation, or we're going to have a conversation about this when it comes to Cooper DeJean down the road, right? You know, you might want to call Le'Veon Bell a trailblazer. He was a guy, if you remember, Le'Veon Bell, you remember him? He played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was a quote-unquote running back who caught a boatload of passes. And what Le'Veon Bell was fighting for when he became a free agent, if you recall when this all happened, right? Le'Veon Bell in 2017 caught 85 balls. He had 321 carries, and then he caught 85 passes. He was essentially the best offensive weapon in football. 1,300 yards rushing, 9 touchdowns, 85 catches, 655 yards, and 2 more touchdowns. He was a first-team All-Pro twice. He had 85 catches, 75 catches, 83 catches. And what Bell, now I'm not saying that Barkley is asking for this because he doesn't catch the ball at the same level as Le'Veon Bell did, but what Le'Veon Bell was fighting for was he didn't want to get paid like a running back. He said, I'm a running back and a wide receiver, so I should get paid because I'm good at both of these things. He essentially wanted to be like, hey, I play two positions. You're only paying me for one. But the point is, the Steelers were saying, no. You're a running back. We're not paying you as a wide receiver. You're a running back. So what did Le'Veon Bell do in 2018? He didn't play. Sat out the whole year. Went back to the NFL with the Jets, and no one ever heard from Le'Veon Bell again. He was pretty much a wash. He was pretty much done. He was pretty much cooked by that point. And that was when he was 25 years old. He sat out when he was 26. He came back when he was 27, and then he was out of the league. I mean, he basically, I don't want to say he was out of the league, but after the 2019 season, the most yards he ever got in a year was 328 yards. In 2020, he had 254 yards in 2020 with Kansas City. So the two teams combined, he ran for 328 yards. He was with the Jets. He went to Kansas City. He had 100 yards in 2021, and that was it. Never heard from him again. He was done. So the Eagles are saying, listen, here's a guy that we are going to value. And I'm not saying it's two positions, but we're going to put him at the top of the value list for the position that he plays. Not only running back, but we're going to put him up there with the wide receivers. We're saying that Saquon Barkley is more valuable than A.J. Brown, Smith, and as Andrew Brandt said, I'm going to say he's more valuable than Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and any other wide receiver you want to throw in the mix. The Eagles have said Saquon Barkley, he is the ultimate weapon. Not Randall Cunningham, Saquon Barkley. So when you go back to the decision to sign him, does it make more sense? Or are you still looking at it as you don't pay a running back that kind of money? You don't give a running back that kind of money. Or have the Eagles changed our thinking on paying the running back position? 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Saquon Barkley, is he the ultimate offensive weapon in the NFL?
That goes back to what Barkley said last offseason, Mike, because one of the questions he was asked on the New Heights Show podcast was about why he came to Philadelphia. And one of the reasons he gave was because he said, other teams viewed me as a running back. They said Philadelphia viewed me as an offensive weapon. And he said that really appealed to him, that Philadelphia did not put him in a specific category.
They look at him as a weapon. That's what they're saying. Not a running back, a weapon. And that we are going to build our offense around this particular player, and therefore the value that we put on him is higher. That's the difference. The value that they put on him is higher than just, hey, we have Miles Sanders. He ran for 1,200 yards, and he was a really solid player for us. Yeah, of course, you could do that. You can get Miles Sanders to play running back and get 1,200 yards. And by the way, you got to a Super Bowl with Miles Sanders. You got DeAndre Swift, and he had over 1,000 yards, and he was a nice player for you. But when you truly valued that position, that's what put you over the top. Earlier today on Get Up, Mike Greenberg talked about how Saquon Barkley is deserving of this type of move because he's an elevator. He did it with the Eagles, and he did it with the Giants.
I think that we have rewritten so much of Saquon Barkley practically single-handedly led the Giants to the playoffs 2 years ago.
He did.
Yeah. Saquon Barkley made Daniel Jones a very rich
Got
man.
him a lot, yeah.
He gave Brian Daboll the coach of the year. That was all Saquon. Saquon elevated the Giants when he was there. They just weren't good enough for him to elevate them to where he elevated Philadelphia.
Yeah, he elevated the Giants. He got that team to a playoff. They were down rotten. They were terrible. That's not a good organization. Saquon Barkley was so good that he made them relevant for 1 year. He had that power. He was so good that Daniel Jones got paid. That's how good Saquon Barkley was. But we go back to the question of, is this the type of player that you build your team around? Well, we already got the answer, and the Eagles doubled down on the answer. You build around a player, and by the way, a human being like Saquon Barkley, says Bart Scott.
Mike Singletary told me a long time when he was coaching me that greatness comes in every shape and size. And when you identify that special player, no matter what the position is, you build around him. And Saquon, with the character and everything that he did, it's the type of player that you build around.
It's the character. It's the type of player you build around. That's another great point that Bart Scott makes. It's the character of Saquon Barkley that you have no problem investing in him because of the character that he displays in the locker room and on this football team. And that is why I think people are happy to see what the Eagles did yesterday.
Mike, remember during the NFL mic'd up, Saquon was one of the guys who kept walking around and telling guys, hey, we got to keep going. We got to keep pedal to the metal. Stay in the moment. Stay focused. Like, he was walking around in a full-blown leadership capacity in the biggest game of the year. Him and Lane Johnson were the two guys who were really, checking guys. Not because anybody was getting really necessarily high on themselves, but they were doing it to help guys stay in the moment, to help them win that game.
We saw it all here, too. It wasn't just that game. If you ever watched, video of the Eagles throughout the season, you would see, any mic'd up situation. You would just, that would be on full display, right? That would be
he's walking around talking to guys, getting them focused, helping them stay in the moment, encouraging them. It's just who he is.
All right. It's also who he is, and it is a part of why the Eagles are considered the best run organization for players in the NFL. This is former Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver TJ Houshmandzadeh, who said this about the Eagles.
Philadelphia Eagles, best organization in football. Everybody on their team that earns a big contract, you are rewarded. Like, man, it's kudos to the Eagles. Like, the draft is coming up soon. I'm praying if I'm in the draft that I get drafted to the Philadelphia Eagles, the way they treat their guys.
They have pick 32, so I don't know if you want to wait that long, but you're going to be the last pick in the first round. But I jest in that. TJ Houshmandzadeh, you're praying to play for this team. Crazy to hear that, right? Think about that comment. You are praying his comment there, that they are the best organization for players in the NFL. And I don't even know that it's the best organization in football. It might be the best organization in all sports. Think about that comment. The Philadelphia Eagles might be the most well-run organization in all of sports. Why? They don't make excuses for the salary cap. It's not he makes too much. Yeah, they make business decisions, but they make pertinent business decisions. Like, hey, you're 34 years old. I think we can get you cheaper, and if you think you can go get more money, fine. They don't do it when you're 27 years old. The Eagles would never let Saquon Barkley out the door like the Giants did. And as TJ Houshmandzadeh says, the Eagles, they do not make excuses.
Saquon earned this. He was still in the contract. They didn't have to do this. Look at their team. Both their receivers paid. Their quarterback paid. 3 O-linemen paid. Guys on their defense. But everybody else say, oh, it's the salary cap. Really? What, is the Eagles operating in a different salary cap than everybody else in the league?
They don't operate under a different salary cap. But what they do have is Jeffrey Lurie. I think when we talk about Howie and the credit we give Howie Roseman, we also we cannot discount the role that Mr. Lurie plays in why Roseman can excel at his job. And that is why Lurie and Roseman as an executive tandem are the best in sports right now.
Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, stand up, pat yourself on the back, because you look at the Eagles team. Everybody on their team is getting paid. Right. But what these other teams say? The salary cap, man, we can't do it. No, you can do it if you want to do it. The Eagles are the best organization in football. I want to go there as a free agent. I want to be drafted there. They are doing a hell of a job.
and by the way, TJ Houshmandzadeh played for the Cincinnati Bengals. He knows a bad organization when he plays for one.
Exactly.
Mike Brown is not Jeffrey Lurie.
He's cheap.
He's cheap. He is not willing to spend the money to make his team better.
Not just that, one of the complaints they have every year in Cincinnati on that player survey, Mike, for the NFLPA is that they say the food they're given is like prison food in Cincinnati. What are the Eagles most popular for? They have some of the best food handed to players each and every year in their facility.
The word is out. The Eagles have always had this, this Howie Roseman with the win, the salary cap and the Howie season. But it is now also how they are. And this is one of the reasons why they gave that contract yesterday. This is one of the reasons why they said, hey, let's go do this now. Pat McAfee on the Pat McAfee show discussed that yesterday. Giving Saquon Barkley, this is McAfee who played in the NFL, went to West Virginia, by the way, smart guy, played in the NFL, and he knows that part of what the Eagles did yesterday is about the culture of the organization.
I wonder if there was a conversation that was had that was like, hey, don't you think, by either side? And it's like, yeah, actually, we should.
That does make sense, yeah.
Yeah, we should. And that's
Take care of this guy.
That's the type of culture I think they're trying to build over there too, right? Like Sirianni talks about how much bonding and love and everything, because there is going to be adversity, especially in Philadelphia. Okay, there's going to be adversity in Philadelphia. Their fans are going to bring you some adversity, whether or not there is adversity. I mean, they're winning games last year, and people are calling for heads.
Interesting. And I go back to what I said yesterday. This all starts because Howie Roseman or Jeffrey Lurie, one or the other, comes up and says, hey, we got to do right by Saquon. Mr. Lurie, I need you to be able to write a check for me. And Jeffrey says, whatever you need, Howie, get him signed. Make him happy. He is the key to this organization, and he is the key to why we are so successful. And I think you got that mapped out yesterday when the Eagles went to him and said, we want to be in the Saquon Barkley business. So kudos to the Eagles and kudos to them. But is there anything you have questions about that deal? Why do the Eagles make that deal? Why now? We'll talk about it with Geoff Mosher for Football at 4 coming up on the Sports Bash. We'll get Mike McGarry's reaction to it. Mike, Saquon once played for his Giants. Why did it not work out there? What could they learn from the Philadelphia Eagles? I got your text messages coming in, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Coming up, Mike McGarry at 2:30. Todd Zolecki on the Phillies with a live report from Clearwater at 3 o'clock. The latest on the Flyers trade deadline possibilities with Kecin Durso at 3:30. We are just getting started. It's the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
are one of the teams that was always paying guys a year early. Like so often teams wait till the person's contract up or a player's contract is up and it's till like the very end of it. And I remember Fletcher Cox and Lane Johnson where they just choose to pay, hey, we drafted you, you're in your second year, we're just going to extend you because you're a good player and whatnot. So it's awesome to see. It's one of the reasons why it seems like those people love playing there is how he does take care of them.
That was Dan Orlovsky earlier today talking about why people like playing in Philadelphia. Interesting comment here. Many people said, we just played the clip from TJ Houshmandzadeh who said the Eagles are the best run organization in football, maybe all of sports. Who knows? Got a couple text messages refuting that and said, no, come on. Kansas City has won multiple Super Bowls. They're the best well-run organization. Maybe evolution is happening. Maybe they're passing the torch over. Joe Thuney got traded today. Kansas City can't figure out a way to keep all their guys. Now, maybe they didn't want Joe Thuney. Maybe they were ready to move on from him. A couple of years ago, they traded Tyreek Hill. They couldn't find a way to keep him. Kansas City has won a lot, but they have a great coach quarterback situation. They have a lot of guys who they have to let go because they haven't been able to figure out how to keep them all. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City is here at AC Press McGarry on the X platform, and he joins me now. Mike, are we seeing the changing of the guard where Philadelphia is now maybe the best run organization, if not in all of sports, in football?
Well, I mean, it's certainly tough to argue against it. They are the reigning Super Bowl champs. You go back, as we've talked several times, back to the start of the Andy Reid era in 2000, and more often than not, they have been contenders. What have they been to 3 Super Bowls since 2017? 3 Super Bowls in 8 years, 2 Super Bowl victories. It's hard to argue with a franchise that once prematurely, I think, declared themselves the gold standard before they had really won anything. But if Jeffrey Lurie wanted to come out today and declare the Eagles the gold standard, it would be difficult to argue against them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they won 1 Super Bowl, but they did go 2 years ago, and they won a Super Bowl. So 2 within 8 years, 3 appearances here. You're putting a body of work together, and you start to see, in your mind, you look at Howie Roseman and what he's done, Jeffrey Lurie, the Lurie-Roseman thing. When they signed Saquon Barkley yesterday, what's the messaging there for you? Is this, hey, we just want to do right by this guy? Is this, hey, we want to set the culture for this is who we want to be? How surprising was it, Mike, as a guy who saw Saquon walk out the door to see him get this extension?
Yeah, to me, it says we're going to reward the people. If you come to Philadelphia, if you take a chance on us, we will take a chance. We will reward you for you coming here and performing well and leading us to a Super Bowl championship. It's kind of like we win and everybody eats. Well, yesterday Saquon Barkley got to eat, and the team rewarded him for his effort. And to me, that sends a message to free agents around the league saying, hey, if you go to Philadelphia and you live up to your end of the bargain and you get it done, you win at Philadelphia, you will be rewarded. To me, it's a message sent to the rest of free agents and a message sent around football. Come here, play well. You will be rewarded for your services.
Yes, and right now they have everybody locked up through the 2029 season, some till 2030. They got Hurts, the 2 receivers, now Barkley, 3 of the 5 offensive line. Juergens is the only one that doesn't have a contract past this season coming up. And then, of course, the right guard situation. But you got 3/5 of your offensive line, and Goddard doesn't have a contract either. But this core, Mike, this core of the offense, they have now said, though, right, that this is Barkley's offense. This is a Barkley-centric offense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look back, Mike, at any team that's sustained success. You just talked about the Chiefs a little bit. Go look at the New England Patriots, right? It starts with the coach. It starts with the quarterback. It starts with a few key core members, and then you sort of augment around that core. You bring guys in, like the Chiefs case. You say goodbye to Tyreek Hill. You say goodbye to a running back. You bring in Isaiah Pacheco. The Patriots all those years. You say goodbye to a wide receiver. Oh, you sign Randy Moss as a free agent, okay? But you have that core around you, and I think that's what the Eagles are trying to do. You build that core of what? I don't know how many guys it is, but it's probably maybe 10 to 15 guys that form the core of the team, and you keep that coaching staff, and then you bring in free agents and add draft choices to that core, and you hope to continue to win. But that's the model in the NFL, right, for sustained success. Get that core, because you can't pay everybody. And the other model is to continue to draft well. The Chiefs struggling a little bit sometimes because they didn't draft well. The Patriots, in their down years, and what were their down years? They went to the playoffs, won the AFC East, and got beat in the second round. That was a down year for the Patriots. And maybe the dynasty ended because, Brady got old and left, but they didn't draft well. So that's the key. Draft well, get guys on that rookie contract, get a core of guys you have to pay, and try to augment that and continue down the line and continue winning.
All right, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. Let's go back to Saquon being drafted in New York. At that time, that was criticized a little. You don't take a running back at that spot. Give me your thoughts, Mike, on why was that the wrong pick? Why it didn't work out there?
Yeah, I mean, Mike, it's hard to say because he was injured in New York, and then he had a great season, and they went to the playoffs. It's almost like a situation that the Giants face now, right? They've got the number 3 pick in the draft. Do they trade up and try to get a quarterback? Do they take a quarterback at number 3 who isn't worthy of being number 3 in the draft? Or do they take, the guy who plays both ways from Colorado? Do they take Carter from Penn State? Do you take more
Travis
of
Hunter.
the sure thing,
Yeah, Travis Hunter, by the way, is the guy you're referring to.
Right,
Yeah,
Travis Hunter. So do you take one of those guys, or do you take the quarterback who you're not quite sure of? So, at the time, should they have taken a quarterback for where they were in the development of the team? Maybe, but Saquon Barkley, I mean, he just had the greatest season ever by a running back in football. So can you fault the Giants for taking him second, or can you just fault the Giants for taking Barkley second and not being in position then to maximize his ability the way the Eagles were?
well, right. That's what I was talking about.
Him second and gotten better players
Right.
around him in future drafts.
The
basically,
Giants the Giants tried to start with the running back to build the team. The Eagles had the
Right,
team in
right.
place and then popped the running back as the last piece to the puzzle.
Correct.
And that was really the big difference there. But when you have talked a lot about, like, if this year Saquon's on that team, are they any better? Probably
no.
not. So when you look at this move that Philadelphia makes yesterday, do you see this as a smart, savvy move or too risky?
Well, I think it's a smart, savvy move because, again, I think it shows the players that you care about the players, that you're going to recognize the contribution. And if you come here as a free agent, you're going to get taken care of. And I think the word's going to spread around the NFL. Hey, they took care of Saquon, went there. They won a championship. He had a great year. He got paid even more money. I'm going to go play there because not only going to have a chance to win, but I'm going to get paid well. And if we do win, I'm going to reap the rewards there. So I think it's an outstanding message to send around football. And I think it's, it hangs a beacon on the NovaCare Center saying this is a place where you want to come and play. If you want to win and be well paid and taken care of in the NFL, come here. Come to the Philadelphia Eagles. We do all of those things. I think it's a brilliant move by the Eagles, and I think it'll do them a world of good around the NFL.
Right. That's where a guy like Myles Garrett asked for a trade.
Right.
He says he wants to go to a Super Bowl contender, and he says, no, I don't only want to go to a Super Bowl contender. I want to go to that Super Bowl contender, right? That's where you can almost get someone now to ask, for a trade to come to you, as we're in that season where people are asking for trades. Teams are trying to shed contracts. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, because they didn't have to give them the money now. I liken it to when Hassan Reddick had 18.5 sacks. They got him for under market value. He had 18.5 sacks. And then a lot of the conversation his second year was he wanted a pay raise. Remember, he didn't like hold out, but he didn't show up right away, and there was a little bit there. And then there were people talking about him hunting for sacks and that was one of the problems with their defense. Well, the Eagles could have easily approached Hassan Reddick when he had 18.5 sacks and said, hey, man, great season, exceeded expectations. We're going to give you a raise. And that never happened. That's why I feel like they look at Barkley as not only the centerpiece of the team, but a culture setter for their locker room.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe they learned from the Reddick situation. Maybe, if they had to go back, maybe they do the Reddick situation over again. I don't know. Certainly no inside information there. The other thing, Mike, with these NFL contracts, you never know exactly, how much the money is guaranteed, how much money is he actually going to get. Are they going to cut Barkley before the money kicks in? So who knows? Sometimes the football business can be a little bit of a monopoly money type of deal, too.
No question about that. All right, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. Let's flip over quickly to the Phillies. I don't know if you saw this one or not. This one kind of snuck under the radar earlier today. Ken Rosenthal was on a podcast, and he conveniently threw in there, Mike, hey, I talked to Bryce Harper, who said he's willing to go back and play the outfield if the Phillies find a first baseman. Pretty convenient to say that now, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and it actually surprised me to hear about that. I think it's too late now to do anything about that. I think what Harper is saying about is that the Phillies came to him in, October or November and told him that. I think when you get to spring training, the position that you start in spring training when you're a guy like Bryce Harper is the position you're going to play for 162 games during the regular season. I don't know if Bryce Harper is just trying to be flexible, because I've been in several scrums with him and heard him talking that he actually likes first base. He likes having, playing on the dirt in the infield. So, yeah, I was a little surprised by that, and I think it really doesn't impact the team right now because, we're 3 weeks away from opening day, and there's no way Bryce Harper's going to the outfield now.
Right. Well, I mean, he said he's comfortable playing first base and that he likes it, but essentially, like, if they were able to get a guy, there's a guy, Guerrero, who's a free agent, right? He's going to be a free agent, and maybe the Blue Jays aren't very good, and you're at the deadline, and you make a call. I mean, I wonder if that's a scenario where the Phillies at the deadline say to Bryce, hey, man, we're trying to find this right-handed bat for you, but the only guy plays first base.
Yeah, it certainly keeps your options open, right? And gives you some flexibility and, enhances Harper's reputation as a good team guy. And personally, Mike, from being up at the ballpark, one of the things I miss, one of the things I always thought was great was when Harper ran out to right field and kind of did that salute to the crowd when the Phillies took the field out in right field. He obviously doesn't do it at first base, but, if he wants to go back to right field and bring that tradition back, I'm all for that 110%.
All right, we got breaking news. Mike McGarry's on with us right now. The Eagles are bringing back Zack Baun, a 3-year, $51 million contract. So they have said, Zack Baun, we appreciate you.
Well, I don't know how you don't bring that guy back after that season. And we talked about a couple of days ago, did the moves they make leading up to this, parting ways with Slay, doing this and doing that, was that to create money to bring somebody new in, like a Myles Garrett, or was it used to create money to retain one of your free agents? And again, great move by the Eagles. The guy had an outstanding season. I don't understand how you don't bring him back. And again, says another message around the NFL. If you play for the Philadelphia Eagles and you perform and you win, you will be rewarded. This is the place you want to be in the NFL. So far, I hate to say it, Mike, but Howie Roseman off-season off to another outstanding start. Not only have the Eagles won the Super Bowl, but so far they're winning the offseason too.
Well, they signed Barkley yesterday to a $41 million extension, and just moments ago they have signed Zack Baun to a 3-year, $51 million extension. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. All right, man. Appreciate it as always.
All right, we'll see you down the road, Mike. Talk to you later.
You got it. Mike McGarry, everybody, Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. So let's dabble on that real quick. I have stated many times in this offseason that I think that basically Baun was the priority. Like, whatever, priority, whatever word you want to use, that he was the guy that I would go after. And that's the guy, I don't want to say they targeted, but 3 years, $51 million. Holy moly. That is way over the number that's $17 million a season right there, if it all breaks down. I don't know what the details of the contract are, obviously, but, You're talking about a linebacker now getting paid $17 million.
So according to the reports here, it's only $34 million guaranteed. So that $51 million is not all straight cash. Also, there is an additional $1.5 million in incentives and in escalators per year built into the contract. So this is, if you go by, Andrew Brandt, let's talk about the guaranteed amount, not the grand value of the contract. So it's really a 3-year, $34 million contract, which breaks
That's
out
about
to
10,
what,
little over
11 and a
10
half, 12 million?
3 years, 34 would be a little over 10.
Right. So it's like 11.5 million a year, which is actually less than what we talked about before, Mike. The question was, well, is it worth signing him to 13 to 15 million? Well, now you're getting him about 11.5 million per year.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good number. 11 and a half, you feel comfortable. Here you go. Here's the numbers are in. 3 years, $51 million, 34 guaranteed at signing, an additional 1.5 in incentives with the escalators. But the $34 million at signing, that again, think about this. Jeffrey Lurie just wrote a check yesterday for $36 million, and today he follows it up with a check for $34 million. Take that in your Jerry Jones pipe and smoke it.
Well, listen, Jeffrey Lurie just sold 10% of the team last year. He's got some extra cash on hand. He just won a Super Bowl. He got some extra cash on hand.
Unbelievable. Right? It's an unbelievable. And listen, that's the guy that I really figured.
That's the man right there.
No, Baun. Baun was the guy that I figured that they would target. He would be the guy that I said if they were going to bring one of the guys back, that was the guy that I really felt that they would bring back.
Really quick, what does it say to you about that Baun was brought back before anyone else?
As I said, I think that's the guy they targeted. That's the other guys, and I brought this up a lot. They feel comfortable drafting a defensive tackle. They feel comfortable drafting an edge rusher. Where they have not drafted or don't want to spend draft capital on is a linebacker. So now they say for the next 3 years, we got this guy. We're paid for this guy. We don't have to, now it doesn't mean they have to draft a guy, but now they can draft guys in the later middle rounds and try to develop them to be the next guys. They got Jeremiah Trotter here. Nakobe Dean's a younger player. I know he's had some injury problems, but now you got Zach Baun for the next 3 years at a price that obviously they felt good at. Now, what does that mean for the other guys? I'd be, if they could figure out a way to bring Milton Williams back or Mekhi Becton, one of those guys, now you're really cooking with gas.
Also, what about the hand of Vic Fangio in all of this?
Definitely has a big voice. Definitely. No question. I mean, you look at what Fangio did with Zach Baun, and you say that guy became a difference-making player. He just got Zach Baun a 3-year deal for life-changing money for him. Matt Kate May says, Mike, how much is a Super Bowl worth? Zach Baun made the difference on defense like Barkley did on offense. Pay the guy. He earned it. Well, Matt, he got paid. Zach Baun just got paid by the Philadelphia Eagles. More coming up on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. The breaking news, the Eagles have signed All-Pro linebacker Zack Baun. 3-year, $51 million, $34 million guaranteed, an additional $1.5 million in incentives and escalators. The contract, he is now one of the highest paid linebackers in the NFL per ESPN's Adam Schefter. Let me know your thoughts. 609-403-0973. This one I like. The Barkley one I like. I mean, I'm not going to criticize the Barkley one, obviously. Love having Saquon back. But I thought this one was the one of the offseason. This offseason, go out and get Zack Baun. Put some money into that spot. You can draft another tackle. You could draft another edge rusher. But you don't want to draft another linebacker. Those guys are tough to find. You haven't done a good job finding one over the years. Get this guy. Keep this guy in the fold. And Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, they get it done. 3 years, $51 million, $34 guaranteed at signing. Football at 4. Geoff Mosher in just over an hour from now with the insight on what it means, on why Zack Baun. Baun back with the Birds. It's a 3-year, $51 million deal, but $34 million guaranteed at signing. So you got that, ability again to do what other teams won't do. Pay the money up front. Baun is back. What is next? NFL free agency begins on Monday, but the Eagles have already locked up one of their key free agents. They got 3 other ones, Becton, Milton Williams, and Josh Sweat. We've said a lot right here on the Sports Bash that we think the guy they would target was Zack Baun. They signed him back today.
can get a first baseman who is a difference-making kind of player, then he would definitely do it and gladly do it.
That was Ken Rosenthal, who said he talked to Bryce Harper for a piece at The Athletic and said, yes, Bryce Harper would be willing to move back to the outfield. Who knew? Could that be a part of the 2025 season's plans at some point? How about Bryce Harper? All the news today. Barkley yesterday. Zack Baun signs a 3-year extension today. Possible extension for Bryce Harper. Maybe even moving to the outfield. Todd Zolecki covers the Phillies, MLB.com, Phillies.com, the Phillies Show podcast in Clearwater with the Phils as they continue on here. Obviously, that would be some interesting news, Todd, if Bryce Harper was said, hey, guys, I'll move back to the outfield. Has that been something that has ever been considered as they entered this 2025 season? Maybe not to start the year, obviously, now, but possibly at the deadline, if that's something that they had to find a right-handed bat or something, would that be something that you think they would consider?
Well, I think it's certainly anything is possible, and the fact that Bryce has kind of acknowledged that he would be willing to move, opens the door to that possibility. But even going into this off season, didn't seem like that was in the cards. I know Bryce likes playing first base. I think he thinks he can win a Gold Glove there. I think he enjoys playing first base more than the outfield. But again, he wants to win, so. Yeah, if the situation comes around in July where they have they really need a right-handed bat, or there's an injury or something like that. Yeah, sure, maybe anything is possible. Bryce, hey, he moved from right field to first base. He learned a new position. He just wants to win. I mean, he really does just want to win a World Series. So I don't think he would say, man, here's this right-handed bat that can hit 40 home runs for us, but I want to play first base, so tell him to go take a hike. I don't think he would say anything like that.
Yeah, it's interesting, Todd, because I guess, a lot of people have, texted into the show, and they're like, well, you can't hit Harper second because he doesn't want to hit second, or you can't move him to the outfield because he wants to play first base. It seemingly there's a little bit of perception that he would be unwilling to do these things. You're saying that's not entirely accurate. He might prefer first base, or he might prefer hitting third, but he's not against moving in either situation.
Yeah, well, I will say this about hitting second. He's fine hitting second. I mean, we asked him about that early in camp, and he says, I like to hit third. That's where I love to hit because I like to see a lot of pitches before I hit, so my preference is third. He said, I hit fourth when we went to the World Series in 2022. So I'll hit fourth. He's like, I've also hit second, and I can hit second because I still see some pitches. The one spot he's not real keen on is leadoff. He does not want to hit leadoff. Again, I think it's just a comfort thing for him. So that's probably the only spot he does not truly want to hit. And I can say that because he said it. He said, I just don't want to. I'm not hitting leadoff. I don't want to hit leadoff. So I think he's definitely open to hitting second. Now, again, going back to right field, all indications in the past, year were that he just really liked playing first base. He liked being in on the action every play. He liked how good he was getting. He liked the fact that he could possibly win a Gold Glove there. But he looks around. He knows that you don't play baseball forever, and you're only in your prime for so long. So if he had to return to the outfield for some reason, maybe he would be open to that. Now it'd be interesting to see how actually that would play out because he's mostly played right field, and Castellanos has only played right field. And who moves to left? Who knows? I mean, it might never happen this season, but it is interesting, no doubt.
Todd Zolecki is with us here. As you mentioned, he's only in his prime for so many seasons. So where would the Phillies and Harper be on a contract extension? We heard this a couple of years ago. He signed this 10-year contract, and it's crazy to think that he's creeping into his 7th season in Philadelphia already. So he's starting to get on the back end of that deal. As bizarre as that sounds, I almost feel like I can remember sitting up on that dugout doing that first press conference, but he's now on the back end of that deal. So is that something that the Phillies and he want to prioritize?
And I would not say that they want to prioritize it. I think certainly, Scott Boras and Bryce Harper would love to get something done sooner rather than later. But I think Bryce also understands that he's got several years to go on the contract. I think the Phillies understand he's got several years to go on the contract. I think in the end, it wouldn't surprise me if, a few years down the road, they work on something. Because here's the thing right now, if you do a contract extension and you bump up his AAV, his average annual value, that really affects the luxury tax. And so right now they're over the fourth luxury tax threshold. So you're going to, in the next few years, you're going to have some guys kind of start to fall off. You hope that guys like Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford and Andrew Painter and some of these young prospects step up and kind of lower their luxury tax numbers. And then I think at that point, maybe you think about an extension. So maybe there's an understanding right now, hey, you know what, we're not going to do this now, but the Phillies want Bryce Harper to retire Philly. Bryce Harper wants to retire Philly. So does it really matter if it happens now or happens later? I think it will happen at some point, but I don't think it's anything like before the end of the season or even this off season that's necessarily going to happen.
Be kind of weird if he's playing for another team with the Philly Fanatic tattooed on his arm. I guess that would be kind of a.
That's the other thing too. Exactly right.
Todd, talk about wanting to be in Philly. Ranger Suarez, you wrote about this MLB.com that he wants to play here forever in Philly. But how important, is this first half of the season to make that happen for him?
Well, I think it's he needs to put together a full season from beginning to end, and that's kind of been the one thing that's held Ranger back. Is when he's on, he is as good as anybody in baseball, in my opinion. Just the way he can command and control his pitches, and just how dominant he can be. He was the Cy Young candidate the first 3 months of last season, and then his back bothered, and then he had a hamstring issue, then he had a shoulder fatigue, and that kind of derailed his entire season. But he needs to have a big year. There's no doubt about it. I think he understands it. I mean, he hired Scott Boras in the offseason, and you do that because I think you understand I need to maximize my value, and this is maybe the most important season of my life. Now, that said, the Phillies also have Kyle Schwarber, who will be a free agent after the season. They also have JT Realmuto, who will be a free agent after the season. If I had to rank those three in terms of most likely to re-sign with the Phillies, either before the end of spring training or before opening day 2026, I would probably put Ranger a distant third on that list. It's hard to imagine how it happens. You have Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez locked up. You have Jesus Luzardo under team control through 2026. You still have Taijuan Walker under assigned through 2026. And of course you have Andrew Painter, who they expect to be in the rotation this summer. So if you're going to allocate your dollars in a certain way, it probably would go more towards Schwarber or Realmuto rather than Ranger Suarez, again, because of that perceived surplus that they have in starting pitching right now.
Right, and, I want to get some more thoughts on the pitching, but yesterday you tweeted out, obviously it was kind of a quiet day. They didn't play, and then boom, or they got blown out yesterday, so it was kind of a quiet day, not a lot going on. Although Max Kepler hit his first Phillies home run, but also before that, a innocent tweet from Todd Zolecki, Aiden Miller, Justin Crawford, they got reassigned. So, when you get the big prospects names, but what did you see from those guys? They didn't have a shot really to make the team out of spring training this year, but what kind of impression did either of those two guys make? And are they two names that definitely keep an eye on for this year, or was it just a little bit they're not quite that ready yet?
They both of them made great impressions on this coaching staff and on their teammates because they both seem way more mature than their age. Of course, Justin's dad, Carl, played in the big leagues for years and years. Aiden's older brother's in the minor leagues, so he's got some pro baseball pedigree, I guess you could say. And both of them really impressed me just in terms of how they handled themselves. They acted like they belonged. Rob Thompson talked about that yesterday. Justin had a pretty solid spring. I think he was like 3 for 10. Aiden went hitless in 9 at-bats, but, it's as Rob Thompson said, he was kind of joking with Aiden. He's like, don't worry, you'll get a hit. You'll get a hit up here at some point. I almost said kind of goofing on him, because he knows he can handle that type of situation. So in terms of what happens to him this year, Dave Dombrowski has said both of them could, quote unquote, come fast to the big leagues. But then we follow up naturally. Do you think that means this year? He says, I do not expect Aiden or Justin to play for us this season. He's like, but you can never totally rule things out because good players force the issue and they really can come fast. And so would it be stunning? Would it be absolutely stunning to see Justin Crawford or Aiden Miller in the big leagues this year? No, it would be a little surprising, I guess you could say, just because of how young they are and how relatively inexperienced they are. But there's no doubt that the Phillies are counting on them to be big pieces of their future.
Now, Todd, so much. We're talking with Todd Zolecki, MLB.com, covers the Phillies, the Philly Show podcast. So we always talk about the lineup. Everybody always talks about the lineup. But what about the rotation? Is there a way that they want to stack that thing in your mind? Or is it as simple as Wheeler's the guy, Nola's next, and then whatever happens after that? Or do you think there is a different way they might stack that rotation?
Yeah, actually, I think right now the way they've kind of lined it up, I think what you will see, of course, and this, like you said, Zack Wheeler's going to start opening day. I think Game 2 actually could be Jesus Luzardo starting Game 2. Rob Thompson has said that he wants to split up because at some point in the rotation you have two lefties pitching back to back. He says he wants to split up Luzardo and Sanchez because they're both hard-throwing left-handed pitchers. And so I think it's going to go like this right now: Wheeler Game 1. Jesus Luzardo Game 2, Aaron Nola Game 3, and then probably Christopher Sanchez Game 4. And Game 4 is the home opener. And Sanchez has certainly worked hard this offseason. He's in tremendous shape. He's super motivated. He wants to build on his success from last year. He also pitches excellent at home. So I see him starting the home opener. And then right now, Ranger Suarez as the number 5. So the Rangers kind of come along slowly this thing, although the Phillies say he hasn't really come along slowly, but he was the last starter to make an appearance. He pitched yesterday. He was pretty good, although his velo was down. So I think that's how it's going to line up right now.
What is, to start the year for Painter? Is he going to go to the minors and pitch, or are they just not going to have him throw until the summertime?
No, so the plan right now is that he's still throwing up here. He's still in big league camp. I think they want him to be around all the veteran guys and really get comfortable being with the veteran guys. At some point, they said later in camp, he's going to do live BPs, and then he's going to face hitters in a game situation, like an extended spring training after camp breaks. And I don't know where he's going to start necessarily. They might just start him down here in warmer weather rather than sending him up to, Reading or Jersey Shore or even Lehigh Valley in 40-degree weather and have him go out there. It remains to be seen, but he will be pitching at games, I suspect, at some point earlier this season because, listen, the Phillies have said they think he could be in the rotation July-ish.
Yeah.
So Dave Dombrowski said that could be June, that could be July, of course, and then he said it could also be August. So if it could be June, that means he's going to have to be throwing in games before that. So anything really is possible with Andrew, but they definitely do expect him to be up at some point this year.
All right, I want to bring you into this conversation we were having throughout this week. I predicted the 2025 Phillies pitching staff will be better than the 2011 pitching staff. Is that too far? You covered that team very closely, and now you've seen these guys. Wheeler, Nola, you add Luzardo. You're watching Sanchez kind of develop. They got Painter waiting in the wings. You mentioned how good Ranger is when he's healthy. Do you think the 2025 staff will be better than that 11 staff?
Will they? I don't know, but they definitely could. And actually, so the 2011 rotation, depends how much stock you put in, like the metric of WAR. But on Fangraphs WAR, that 2011 rotation, believe it or not, has the single highest WAR of any rotation in baseball history, even better than like those Braves teams and whatnot. Just it factors in a lot of things. But that rotation was historically great. But it was interesting last season, like through June when Ranger was pitching great, Nola and Sanchez and Wheeler and Spencer Turnbull was pitching great at that point. I was looking and they were actually that Phillies rotation at the time was actually on pace to be better than that 2011 rotation. So, man, if everybody stays healthy and does what they're supposed to do, Lazaro looked great in his first start. Sanchez looked great in both of his starts. If everybody can stay healthy, I think it's definitely possible that they could be better than that 2011 rotation. And that is saying something because you have one Hall of Famer in there, 2 Cy Young winners, multiple All-Stars, 20-game winners. That was a heck of a rotation. But this rotation on paper should be deeper because that was really 4 deep in a sense with Halladay, Lee, Hamels, and Oswalt. Then you had Kyle Kendrick and Vance Worley, Joe Blanton kind of pick up that 5 spot. But this is like 5 legitimate starters in this rotation.
Yeah, that team in 2011. You're right. They had the press conference down in Clearwater when it all put together, and then they wanted to make sure Blanton was involved in it. You got the similar situation here where there's 5 guys who all are all-star level performers. By the way, Lazardo did pitch today. I guess he gave up 6 runs in that second inning, but looked good in that first inning there. Early spring, you were writing about this too, about these guys kind of working on stuff. And somebody asked the other day, should we be worried about Wheeler? As one of those guys that and I bring this up, it was kind of how the whole conversation came together with the 2011 thing, Todd, is for 2 years, Halladay was probably the best of all 10 guys in the conversation here. But Wheeler's full Philly stretch was probably better than Halladay's 4 years because his last 2 years were really tough, and he just fell off the cliff after that third year. Right. But his third year, he started to show signs of mortality. Do we wonder when that will come for Wheeler?
Boy, you know what? Yeah, he got hit. I can't even say he got hit hard yesterday. There was like 5 ground balls that left the infield, and it's like, when's the last time that's happened? Where like 5 ground balls have gotten through. There was a throwing error in the outfield that advanced some runners. So, and honestly, I talked to Zack afterwards, and he was like, I didn't throw the day before. It was an off day. Ball fell a little heavy. I just didn't feel great today. But I would have zero concern about a lot of these spring training numbers. I remember, Cole Hamels, man, I would love to know what his cumulative spring training ERA was in the Grapefruit League pitching for the Phillies, because I bet you it was over 5. He was like the worst spring training pitcher I've ever seen in my life. You're like, how does this guy get anybody out in the regular season? He is so bad in Florida. But, he was just literally for Cole Hamels, it was just, I am working on specific things. I don't care if I get hit. I like literally, and so I think that's the case with a lot of these guys. They're working on things. If they get great results, awesome. But if they don't get great results, they're not walking home and leaving the ballpark during the day going, oh my gosh, I got to be better next time. I think that's more like late in the spring. You want to see them trying to get some results. The early starts are for fine tuning stuff.
All right, Todd Zolecki with the Phillies. They are trailing Detroit 6-0 right now. All 6 came in the second against Jesus Luzardo. And, of course, spring training continues. We'll have more updates here on the show. You can check out the Philly Show podcast with Todd Zolecki, Jim Salisbury, Ruben Amaro Jr. You had special guest Jason Kelsey on there the other day. Who's his favorite player?
Yeah, well, his favorite player growing up was Jim Thome. So, and his favorite player now in the Phillies is Kyle Schwarber, who's a Cincinnati guy. So, an Ohio guy, I should say. Obviously, Jason and Travis are from Ohio. But that was a lot of fun. We talked Eagles, a little bit of Eagles, but a lot of Phillies. And a lot of Jim Thome talk and a lot of Kyle Schwarber stuff. And it was great, man. He's the best.
Check out that full podcast, The Philly Show, on all podcasting platforms. Todd, always appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks, dude. Take care.
All right. By the way, Luzardo in the game today. So this is an interesting little nugget to it. Luzardo's pitching in the second, and Rob Thompson is on the game's on ESPN today, television. By the way, right now, Roger Clemens is interviewing his son, Cody, in the middle of the game here. So it's gotten to that portion of the 6-0 game. It's only the third inning. So Roger Clemens is in the crowd. He is interviewing Cody Clemens, who's playing first base right now. In the second inning of the game, Rob Thompson is getting interviewed. And as this is all happening, Luzardo throws 3 straight pitches, and all 3 go out of the park for a home run. And as you can imagine, Rob Thompson didn't have much to say on any of them. I mean, he just kind of stoically was like, well, okay. I guess that's not good news there. But good stuff from Todd Zolecki, as always. We're going to talk to Todd more throughout the baseball season this year here on the Sports Bash Live. If you're a fan of the Phillies, you got to listen to the Philly Show podcast with Todd Zolecki, Jim Salisbury, and Ruben Amaro Jr. They do a really good job of breaking down Phillies. They have great insight. Todd's been on the beat for a long, long time. So really good guy to have back on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. So there you go, little Phil's information, because I thought the big story, as we started this day, one of the key stories to the show today was going to be this Bryce Harper stuff. Bryce Harper telling Ken Rosenthal that he would go play the outfield again, because there's a lot of people who just kind of think that Harper is unwilling to do that. But here's what Ken Rosenthal said on a podcast earlier. I guess, was it today, the podcast? What's the podcast?
It's actually called Foul Territory on MLB Network.
MLB Network, Foul Territory. Ken Rosenthal says this about Harper.
In the meantime, he's at first base. He is happy at first base and comfortable there, and he enjoys the extra work that he does there. So far, so good. He really rated well defensively according to the advanced metrics last season.
So he likes playing first base. He doesn't have a problem with first base. In fact, it doesn't sound like he wants to even leave first base. It's just that he is willing to go back to the outfield for the Phillies if they need him to.
Yes, he is willing to go back to the outfield, perfectly willing. He has no preference. And his thought is, if the Phillies can get a first baseman who is a difference-making kind of player, then he would definitely do it and gladly do it.
That's the key is there. If the Phillies, and I can tell you right now, Nicky Nuggets is probably fuming to hear that because he has been saying for a while right here on the Sports Bash, the fact that Harper won't go or hasn't gone or didn't go to the outfield is why he thinks, hey, they could have brought Rhys Hoskins back. Now, my contention to that was Rhys Hoskins wasn't very good last year. They could have had Rhys Hoskins come back. And maybe, I thought Hoskins would have been an interesting bat in the middle of this lineup, but he was not a very good bat for the Brewers in the middle of their lineup.
Well, that's why I thought the specific example that Rosenthal discusses on the Foul Territory show, I think is an example of, hey, you don't move Harper away from first for Rhys Hoskins, but you do move him out of first base for this kind of player.
So he's there for now, but the scenario he mentioned during the offseason was if there was a chance the Phillies could have gotten Pete Alonso toward the end, then maybe at that point, sure, he would have moved back.
All right, that's something. That didn't even cross my mind as we're having this conversation right now is, hey, they could have had a Pete Alonso and put him at first base and moved Harper to left field. Now you have your right-handed bat in the middle of the lineup, and Harper, I guess, goes and plays left field.
And now you're in a conversation where you mentioned to Zolecki about Vlad Guerrero Jr. So now if you go into this season and you say, hey, the season's going well, but maybe not as well as we want, now we can get a guy like Vlad Jr. in here. We trade some pieces. Like, for example, you're willing to trade pieces for a guy like Vlad Guerrero Jr. potentially more than a Garrett Crochet, right?
Well, yeah, because you have enough pitching. You really don't need the pitching, and that was always kind of a confounding reason. But their reason, I think, was, hey, let's get a young top-of-the-rotation guy in the event that one of our older top-of-the-rotation guys kind of, begin to fall off a little bit.
And Vlad Jr. is a guy who he has said that he wants a contract extension. He doesn't say he doesn't have to where he has to be, though. He just said he wants a long-term deal. So if you're the Phillies and you're looking to the future beyond what you have right now, right, this current window that you're in, Vlad Jr. would make sense.
All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Yes, he would make sense. He would be a right-handed bat that could hit in the middle of the Phillies lineup and play first base.
And his age.
And, yes, and keep in mind, what you just heard from Ken Rosenthal is that he talked to Bryce Harper, who says he would be willing to move back to the outfield. I have an inclination that Nicky Nuggets is going to bring this up today during the Nuggets session here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. When we come back, though, the Flyers have one more game before the trade deadline. Is it an important game to what they might do? Find out next when we talk to Flyers insider Kecin Durso on a day where the Eagles Breaking news, they're re-signing All-Pro linebacker Zack Baun, 3 years, $51 million. And our Eagles off-season news this hour brought to you by Broadlee's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning, your trusted source for plumbing, service, and installation for generations. Call 609-390-3907. Online, broadlees.net. All right, 331 Sports Bass Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. Like, subscribe, be a part of the show. 609-403-0973 on the text board. Flyers back in action tomorrow. It's the final day before the deadline. They'll play Tampa Bay. They currently sit 4 points out of a playoff spot. Kecin Durso covers the Flyers for 97.3 ESPN.com. And he joins us now as the deadline on Friday, 3 o'clock. And, of course, Kevin, we have talked before. Nothing the Flyers have done recently or anything, whether they win, lose, draw Friday night, will change. You can't draw anymore, but will change the way they think going into Friday. Agree? Disagree?
No, I don't think it changes anything. And I think that when you look at the result from last night's game, that only furthers it. You're not there. You're not going to be one of those teams. There's too many teams in front of you. Maybe something changes if you win that game last night. If you win and you're now all of a sudden, the way that things played out, you would have been 2 points out of a playoff spot. Maybe you have some reconsiderations, or at the very least, you further stick to your high price. I don't think that's going to change either, but I think you stick to your high prices and someone has to wow you to make you change your course of action. You still have a shot at the playoffs, but you also don't have any reason to necessarily sell like crazy. You don't have a timeline on those guys. The guys that are left, it's not your traditional rentals, so they don't have to do anything, and you can let everybody come to you in that situation. But as things kind of play out, the more that I look at the way that game went, you're not there. You're not going to make the playoffs. I know what the standings say, but you're not going to make the playoffs. And once you accept that, you're at that crossroads where you have to decide what to do. They're still not in a position to me where they have to do anything, or at least I think that that's where their mindset is, that they don't have to do anything. They've constantly said they're not actively shopping guys, but things change quickly when you're faced with a deadline. And I think that as activity picks up, they're going to be faced with some difficult decisions because it could be the best time to do some of this.
All right, so who are some of the guys? We talked about Scott Laughton. He seems like he would be one of the guys, and in fact, it's been reported by multiple people that there's at least 7 teams that had interest in Laughton. You have said they are holding out for a first-round pick for Laughton. Do you think there's any shot that at the last minute they buckle and say, we'll take a second? Because there has been reports that Winnipeg has offered a second.
Tough to say at this given moment because the deadline is going to, and the way that the market plays is going to dictate that. Right now, I think absolutely not. I think right now they would not cave on that asking price. There's been too many deals going on lately that indicate that the first may not be out of the question, not necessarily based on, because I've seen a lot of conversation about, is Scott Laughton even worth a first-round pick? And a lot of people kind of question that. And if you're looking straight at production numbers, no, he's probably not. But the Flyers hold out for the intangibles that he brings in terms of leadership and locker room presence and culture. And that's what they really cling to. And teams do value that. So when you get into a situation where there are as many teams potentially looking at a player like Laughton as there are, you enter a bidding war situation and you don't have to budge from your asking price, because why should you? I think there would be a reason for a lot of teams to think that's going to be a fair value if they really want Scott Laughton to be part of their Stanley Cup run down the road. So I wouldn't be budging on that price right now, just because, within the last hour, a trade just went down between Seattle and Tampa. Seattle got 2 first-round picks and a second for 2 players that aren't much higher than Scott Laughton in terms of value, at least in my opinion. And yet, that's what the market's dictating right now. And it's a team, Tampa comes off the board in that sense because they did make an acquisition there. They're not going to have cap space. But the 3 teams that I keep hearing more and more things about with Laughton are Toronto, Winnipeg, and New Jersey. And they haven't made that move yet. And as long as they haven't made a move and more options are off the table, Trent Frederick got traded from Boston yesterday to Edmonton. That was a player that people thought would be a fit for teams like that. Jake Evans from Montreal was a player that people thought might be someone that would be looked into at the deadline. He re-signed with Montreal. He's off the board. So as more of those options fall off the board, more teams might get desperate. So I would stick to your guns right now with 48 hours to go until this deadline and wait it out, because, and I want to clarify here, first round pick or first round equivalent is what we're being told a lot now. So if there's a prospect out there for a team like Toronto, let's say, who may not have a lot of draft capital to trade, but has a player that's young and fits what the Flyers are looking for, don't be surprised if that's the direction they go either.
Would you say that Ristolainen is the second guy? It doesn't seem like he's generating as much interest. But if they were to move Lawton, would Ristolainen be the next guy?
Yeah, he'd be the next guy in terms of the next most interest, I would say, the next most likely. It doesn't mean I think it's very likely that he moves ultimately. I just haven't seen the same, and things change quickly, but I haven't seen the same level of interest. Scott Lawton's got a lot of teams that seem like they're interested, and all of the reports kind of favor that show there's a lot of interest out there. I haven't seen that kind of buzz with Ristolainen. I think that two things kind of get in the way with that one. One, Ristolainen has 2 more years left on his contract at $5.1 million. That's a little bit harder to move in season. You still have to factor in that money's got to come from somewhere in season. The cap's not going anywhere right now. It will in the offseason. That might be a better offseason decision. The other part is that, it seemed like the market might be there for Ristolainen on a bigger level going into Four Nations. Then he didn't get to play. He was injured during Four Nations. He didn't get to be on that international stage. And even though he's come back from injury and been fine, there's teams that are probably a little wary about his health just because it was so recent. So those two things kind of factor in, I think, have taken away from some of the interest. At this given moment, it feels like Lawton or bust in terms of Flyers' potential moves at the deadline. But, who knows? If somebody is looking for a defenseman like that and really hits the Flyers with an offer that they can't refuse, don't be surprised if they're willing to take it. They have to at least take it into consideration.
Right, yeah. So those are the two names that we've heard a little bit about. Is there anybody else that, maybe should keep their phone handy?
There's been some talk about Andrei Kuzmenko being flipped right away, but I don't get the sense that that's going to happen just because, assuming nothing happens between now and tomorrow night's game, that'll be his 7th game as a Flyer. He looked really good last night, all things considered, scored a goal against his former team that for the moment anyway, made it seem like all of a sudden they were going to get right back into that game. They were down by 1 and they gave up a goal right after to kind of take the wind out of their sails. But I think they still want to see him, so I don't expect them to flip him at the deadline just to acquire more. The only other guy I've wondered about is maybe Eric Johnson, who's on an expiring contract, that they do kind of do him a service and get him to a contender at the very end of his career. He has won a Stanley Cup before, but maybe give him that one more shot to be on a playoff team, even if he's just a 7th or 8th defenseman that doesn't play much but gets the chance to be attached to a team. But I'm not expecting much. It really is Lawton, Ristolainen, and that's about it right now. Because of the fact that they made their kind of one significant move with the Farabee Frost trade a month ago. Those two guys, ironically, back in Philadelphia last night. But that was really the big move, and Lawton, Ristolainen would be kind of the companion moves to that if they get there. But it's really down to those two guys, and I think favoring Lawton more than Ristolainen.
So ultimately, Friday, you'll be back on. We'll be discussing the deadline, and there won't be much to discuss. Is that your take?
Depends. If they actually go through with it and move Lawton, and I keep wondering kind of, because this has happened, Lawton had a little fun with the situation with the help of Eric Johnson. Apparently this was Eric Johnson's idea to take the picture at dinner with that looked like the Last Supper as kind of a way to troll people that maybe something's coming sooner than later. Lawton even said it himself. When you've been in trade rumors for 5 years, you kind of try to make light of the situation. And that's kind of just it. He's been in the rumors for so long that you start to wonder at his age, at his level of experience, just at his role, if there's ever going to be a better time than now to make this move, especially when the market seems to be heating up for him. So I think that one I'm leaning more and more towards getting over the finish line. So I think that we'll have maybe something to talk about in terms of whatever they get back for Lawton. If it's the first equivalent, I think we have a lot to talk about because that could be somebody who's actually playing for the team potentially the next day when they play Seattle on Saturday afternoon. But I don't think we're going to have much to talk about with Ristolainen and certainly not anybody else on the roster. I think that as much as they said they'll listen on just about anyone, I don't think there's much interest out there for anyone else at this given moment that they're really going to entertain seriously other than those two.
And you would be shocked, let's say they won tomorrow night, right? And somehow they're 2 points out of a wild card spot, that they added somebody. That would be almost 0%.
To me, it should be. The only thing that I'll say is, we felt that way last year too, that they had positioned themselves to be sellers for most of it, even though they were in a playoff spot, and they still did bring in Eric Johnson last year at the deadline, which was meant to bolster their blue line because they didn't have a whole lot going on there at the time. They were battling injuries, and they kind of treated that like, well, look, we still want to honor the fact that we're in a playoff spot, even though we did sell off a bigger piece before making that acquisition. So you never know. They might do something on a small scale like that. Maybe see if there's anybody they can add for a later draft pick, like a fourth, kind of what they did last year.
What do they think about the two goalies what do they think about their goaltending situation? I mean, are they like, hey, we think Fedotov, if he just keeps playing, I know he played well against Winnipeg, and like, do they view him as a legitimate backup? Do they hope that he's like the next guy? Like, what is their mindset with him?
It's complicated because of the fact that Sam Harrison's been the number one for most of the year. They've got to tread lightly with this one because you're seeing signs, whether it's, I saw the signs already when they lost the game in Pittsburgh last week that they had a 3-0 lead. Eventually that disappears. They lose 5-4 in overtime. Harrison got pulled after 5 shots, gave up 3 goals. The last 2 were not particularly good. He really needs to stop those. You worry about overusing him like they did last year, and that kind of clouds judgment on how good he can be sometimes. I keep calling him a capable starter. I'm not sitting here saying he's elite by any stretch, but he's capable of doing the job. That takes away from a lot of things, though. It takes away from finding out more about Fedotov. Honestly, there's really no reason Fedotov didn't start the game against Calgary last night to begin with, because he played so well against Winnipeg. Give him another chance. Why not? You're still playing the game of evaluating and trying to figure things out. Even though they've got 3 goalies technically on the roster, it might as well be 2. We don't know anything about Alexei Kolosov. He backed up against Winnipeg, but it's really the first anyone's seen anything of him in a long time. Danny Briere was quoted in the Inquirer today about, that it's not ideal, and I'll leave it at that, was kind of the situation that Kolosov's not playing in the minors, also not playing at the NHL level, kind of just sitting around with that situation at all. And then you wonder about Fedotov's development. Do they see him? I don't see him as a long-term play here. I think they're trying to figure out whether or not there's anything to it. Maybe they're trying to see if they can eventually get value out of him in another way on the trade market or otherwise. He's got 1 year left on his contract that if he plays enough and plays well, maybe somebody's willing to take that on next season. A few goalies have already been moved close to this deadline, so you never know. That might be part of their mindset, or an off-season move or something like that. But right now they just need to have somebody who mans that position, for better or worse, good or bad, and that's kind of where they are right now. Is that it's not the best situation, but they've got to have 2 goalies on the roster, and that's where it's at.
All right, Kecin Durso covers the Flyers. Tomorrow night they'll take on Tampa Bay, the Lightning, and then the deadline on Friday. He'll be back on Friday to kind of recap it all and see where this Flyers team is as they enter the weekend. They'll play Carolina, then Tampa again. So a little tough stretch for the Fly Guys here, and you can listen to those games on 97.3 ESPN. All right, buddy, we'll talk to you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
There's Durso, everybody, here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. Follow, subscribe, like, and be a part of the show. All right, when we come back, the latest Football at 4, Geoff Mosher in 15 minutes on Zack Baun, why the deal, how they got it done, what it means. That's coming up here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. 350, 10 to the top. Mike Gill, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Zach Baun is back. 3 years, $51 million, $34 million guaranteed. You know, I had thought all along he would be the guy that they would prioritize. He would be the guy they would go out and get. But I am a little surprised that he got a 3-year, $51 million deal with $34 million guaranteed. Now, this is a big number, man. What year are we? Are pigs flying outside?
Mikey goes back to what Howie Roseman said. He says that he has been trying to evolve as a GM, and that he's been trying to learn from his mistakes. And I still believe that the Eagles made a mistake a couple of years ago to let T.J. Edwards walk. And so I think this is Howie's way of saying, I learned from my mistakes. I'm bringing the guy back.
Well, listen, every mistake that he has made, you know, Jalen Reagor, he drafts and he misses on Justin Jefferson. He fixes the mistake with A.J. Brown. He fixes the mistake with Devontae Smith when he takes J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. He thought he got his two receivers with Reagor and Whiteside. They both flame out, so he makes an improvement. He lets Edwards walk, and now, obviously, he did something that many people didn't think he would do. He drafted Nakobe Dean, a linebacker. Now, that was in the third round. Some people thought they might have taken Dean in the first or second round. They did not, but they still did something that he normally wouldn't do, was draft a linebacker in the top 3 rounds. And then they signed Zach Baun. So this isn't like them saying, hey, we're going out and prioritizing linebacker. But this time, when the linebacker excels, they make sure that the linebacker doesn't get away. That's the difference. This time, when they had a chance to say, hey, Zach Baun, we found you, we molded you, we made you, you're one of us, and we're not letting you get away. That's the difference this time around. That was the big thing. And he does it before Baun gets any offers or someone can talk to him.
Well, that was the question I asked you previously, Mike. I had asked you, isn't part of the key to this is get the Baun before he ever hits free agency?
Had to.
Don't let him talk to anybody else. Don't let him leave the building.
Don't let him get anybody else's phone call. And that's what you have to do. You got to be aggressive. You start checking things off the list. You know, what a world we're living in 2025. The Eagles are signing running backs and linebackers.
It's a beautiful thing.
Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. And, guys, even though the world is changing around us, what doesn't change is age. Game Day Men's Health, Egg Harbor Township. You know, if you want to get back out there on the field, maybe a little Saturday morning softball league, a little basketball hoops this summer, go to Game Day Men's Health and let them check you out first. They have a whole lab on site to get your testosterone levels. If you're somebody who's looking to get back to peak performance, reignite that intimacy with that special someone, you definitely want to feel your best. And they can hit all the stops. They can check you out and make sure you're ready to go for the summer season down the shore. You want to feel and look your best. Game Day Men's Health, Egg Harbor Township, 609-365-7088, 609-365-7088, online at GameDayMen'sHealth.com. They're local, right here, English Creek Avenue at EHT. It's a friendly environment, very safe, very cool place to go in and check out. Consultation, first time, free. Get your blood work done there. It's a really cool spot. So if you're somebody who can feel that age coming on, you can feel it. Like I couldn't lift my arm the other day. I had 40-year-old shoulder. I had tennis elbow, old man elbow. They've got one of the only machines in the state that can work on that for you. I saw it. It was a really cool machine, really cool room, really nice people, by the way. Make you feel really comfortable. That's Game Day Men's Health, Egg Harbor Township. Zach Baun is back. How did it get done? Why? Is Geoff Mosher surprised? 3 years, $51 million? He joins us coming up next for Football at 4 on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. Like and subscribe. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. You just heard that open there with Jeffrey Lurie. He just hungers for more. The fans deserve it. The culture begs for it. Man, those were words that were spoken a couple of years ago by Jeffrey Lurie. It is a precursor to what we are now seeing. The Eagles do something they generally do not do. They have signed linebacker Zack Baun to a 3-year, $51 million deal. We're going to be breaking down every angle of the deal and kind of give us some insight on why Zack Baun was the guy. Why Zack Baun, not Josh Sweat? Why Zack Baun, not Milton Williams? You know, it's something that I have said a lot on this show, which is I think Zack Baun was the guy that I think they should and will target. And the reasoning really becomes, listen, they have had a propensity in the past to draft defensive tackles and hit on those guys. They drafted Fletcher Cox all the way back to that time. They drafted Jalen Carter. They drafted Jordan Davis, and I know Jordan Davis isn't what we all wanted him to be, but he's still a starting rotational player on this team. They drafted Milton Williams. They drafted Moro Ojomo. They have drafted and found defensive tackles through the years. So that is not something that they have had troubles with. But they have had trouble finding linebackers. They have had edge rushers come through here, whether it be through the draft or whether it be in free agency. The Eagles don't mind. They put it this way. The Eagles trust their front office, scouts, and they trust themselves to find edge rushers and defensive tackles. We talked about it in the last segment. Howie Roseman has kind of figured out what he's good at and what he's not good at. And when he's made mistakes, he's found ways to fix those mistakes. And when he let TJ Edwards walk, he found Zack Baun through look, he might have asked backwards himself into Zack Baun. I'm not sitting here saying that Howie Roseman gets all the credit for finding Baun, but he does get credit for not letting Baun walk out the building, because we know that Vic Fangio had a lot to do with Zack Baun coming back here and re-signing or signing in the first place. But now Roseman says, let's approach this guy before he hits the market, and let's make sure he does not get out of our nest. How do we make that happen? 3 years, $51 million, $34 million guaranteed. You know, what I want to know is, how are they continuing to hand out all these contracts, man? They just have a boatload of contracts that they are continuing to hand out. Player after player after player, the amount of money that is invested into the key players on this team. And I'm talking about AJ, Mailata, Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, obviously Hurts. Obviously, after yesterday, you're talking about Saquon Barkley. Plus, keep in mind, you got to pay Juergens. You're going to have to pay Quinyon Mitchell. You're going to have to pay Cooper DeJean. You're going to have to pay handsomely, by the way. Think about this. Mr. Lurie is writing these checks, and at the same time, he is understanding that I still have a huge check that I'm going to have to write to Jalen Carter. I'm going to have big checks ready to write for Quinyon Mitchell. I'm going to have big checks that I'm ready to write for Cooper DeJean. And who else might they have to approach? Cam Juergens. Juergens is on the last year of his rookie deal. Remember, Juergens played safety last year. It was his first year as a safety, as a center. Excuse me, I said safety. It was his first year as the center. He started at guard the year before, and he was a backup player his rookie year. So he's now entering, his fourth year in the league. So this is his last year on the deal. They have to sign him. They got to figure out what they want to do at right guard. I think that they either bring Becton back or Tyler Steen will be the right guard next season. That's the way I look at this. They're not going to go spend money for a free agent to play right guard. They have enough confidence that Tyler Steen can play right guard for this team and that they can fill in the pieces someplace else. But when they sign Zack Baun, 3 year, $51 million, what does it do? It puts him in the window with the offensive guys. It says, you matter to us. You mean something to this defense. And now the question will be, and really trying to figure this one out is how do they put the pieces all together to get the guys I mentioned? Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Cam Jurgens. Is there anybody else that needs a contract that's in that younger range that's going to have to say, well, what about me? You gave all the veteran, guys in their primes contracts. Now we're the next guys. That group of guys that I just mentioned, is there anybody that I'm forgetting here? They've already paid Chauncey Gardner. Trying to think, is there somebody else? Oh, Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith is another one. He's going to be going into his third year now.
And then don't forget, you drafted DeJean in the second round, so you don't have that 5th year on his rookie deal. So he will be coming up before Mitchell does.
Yes. So they're going to have, but you figure that.
I know it's 3 years away, but I'm just thinking of guys who are coming up in the future.
All those guys. That's why I said I paired them all together. You have to now pick and choose how you're going to kind of lay this out. How are you going to lay this out? Pick and choose. I don't know what you do. Do you prioritize Quinyon Mitchell over DeJean? Do you prioritize them together? Do you? How does Howie Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles front office kind of slot those guys? Jalen Carter's obviously, this is now his 3rd season, right? This is Carter's 3rd season here. Is Jalen Carter going to be the guy? What's Carter make? I mean, is he going to be a guy now that says, because the last thing you want is the one guy that says, you're paying everybody else, what about me? Right? What about me? And that's when things start to buckle a little bit, is when you start to throw out the checks and there's somebody who wants the check and he's not getting the check.
Currently, Chris Jones is the highest paid defensive tackle in the league. His AAV, his average annual value for his salary, is $32 million. So I'm assuming.
No, what is Jalen Carter getting paid this season coming up?
Well, you mean this? I mean his rookie contract.
Yeah, what is his contract for this season coming up? Because he's now going into his 3rd year. So theoretically, he could be one of the guys that says, hey, you're starting to pay everybody. What about me? And that's the last thing you want if you're Philadelphia, is for somebody to now say, well, you paid everybody else and you forgot about me over here.
His total money, Carter, for this coming year is almost $6 million.
Not great.
Next year would be $7 million.
All right, let's bring Geoff Mosher in for today's Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by Bet365. Jeff, yesterday, Adam Kaplan on the air as Saquon Barkley signs the big deal. Today, you are on the air when Zack Baun signs the big deal. Running backs, linebackers, are pigs flying? What's happening here with this Philadelphia Eagles team?
I don't know. Who's tomorrow? Tomorrow's Thursday. Andrew? Maybe he'll get the Mekhi Becton or Milton Williams news, and we'll make it a trifecta.
I don't know. Are you surprised that they got this done before he got to free agency, or was the writing kind of on the wall that this is the guy that they wanted to target and get this done?
No, I'm not surprised. A lot of extensions, in-house extensions, are done in that time frame between the end of the combine and the start of the new league year. Why? Well, because at the combine, teams do a good job of talking to agents and trying to get an idea of what the market is going to be for certain players, and they come back with that idea in mind. And then sometimes they'll make a move. Sometimes they'll see if that market truly develops. But you can understand why they didn't want to mess around with Zack Baun because of his importance to the defense, the lack of a Zack Baun on the, beneath him. Sure, they like Jeremiah Trotter Jr., but, he's a 5th-round pick entering year 2. I'm not sure that they assume that Jeremiah could just step in and give you what Zack Baun gave you. And plus you have Nakobe Dean, who is coming off an injury and has some uncertainty about when he'll be ready. So it was clear that Zack Baun, of all the in-house free agents, was priority number 1 and the guy most likely to sign before the start of free agency.
The deal is huge. I mean, it's a 3-year, $51 million deal, $34 million guaranteed. He has an extra couple escalators and incentives. Give me your thoughts on 3 years, $51 million, $34 guaranteed. I mean, this guy went from complete unknown afterthought to one of the highest paid linebackers in football.
It is a truly remarkable story. I mean, there aren't this many kind of stories. Like you think about Kurt Warner, right? Stocking shelves at a supermarket, then goes to camp with the Rams. And then the next thing you know, he's winning a Super Bowl as his first year as a starter for the Rams. I mean, it's on that level of unprecedented, surprising, and especially when you consider the position that he plays and the organization that he's playing for, an organization that sort of looks for bargain deals at linebacker and usually gets I don't want to say a bargain deal, but usually kind of gets the play out of linebacker that they pay for, which is average, sometimes below average. Occasionally they hit on a guy like TJ Edwards who gives them above average, but this is a rare case, Mike, and it's a guy who, unlike other Eagles linebackers in the past, and we've talked about this a little bit over the course of this year and last, is that the Eagles are now actually looking for linebackers that have some good size to them that they didn't know. They were the kings of the undersized linebackers. Zack Baun's not undersized, a big guy. And obviously now they're breaking protocol and shelling out big money for that position.
Well, how much is this in your mind? Hey, we let TJ Edwards walk. We can't let that happen again.
Well, it's a little bit different because as great as TJ Edwards played for the Eagles, and as much as he improved, to even compare his season with Zack Baun's season would be unfair. And that's why his contract in free agency, TJ Edwards with the Bears, was good, but nowhere near what the Eagles are paying Zack Baun. But to your point, I've said this to you a few times on the show ever since TJ left, and even more recently, Adam and I found out that was one of those moves that Howie, in retrospect, regretted, and you can understand why. Not even making TJ Edwards an offer, because last year the linebacker play was so substellar with Zach Cunningham and Nick Morrow and I forgot who else. Well, N'Kobe played, but he was getting hurt. They could have used TJ Edwards last year, and maybe that would have made a little bit of a difference on that defense, which, unraveled as the year went on, but mainly because of the coaching. But Howie Roseman was not going to let this happen again. He was not going to take a talent as good as Zack Baun and not at least try, right, to make the attempt to re-sign him, which he does.
He's the, as you noted over at InsideTheBirds.com, Geoff Mosher's with us, Football at 4, $17 million per season. He's fourth among linebackers. It's Roquan Smith, it's Fred Warner, it's Jermaine Edwards, and Zack Baun. I want to get from you what Baun was able to do to make such an impact on this defense.
Yeah, I'll talk about it here, but Andrew DeCecco did an awesome Daily DeCecco podcast today on it, in which he kind of goes through what Zack Baun was showing at training camp. And really, this is part of the rarity of the story, Mike. When they signed him, they didn't know he was going to be able to play inside linebacker. Vic Fangio is the first to tell you that he had an inclination he might be able to do it, but he wasn't sure. And even in the middle of the season, he didn't think, even if he did, he was going to play at this all-pro Super Bowl champion level. But one of the things that you saw at training camp, and Andrew did a great job of explaining it, was just a natural and almost inherent instinct on how to play the position, just being really smart, being able to key and diagnose, being able to get downhill into the right gaps. I mean, this is all the stuff that, I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody, but like Devin White has been a linebacker his whole life. And he clearly wasn't as good as it because he, signed for that money and didn't even end up making the team. But
was that this training camp?
That actually was. That was less than a year ago. Hard to believe. Just about 8 months ago, right? So Zack Baun, and you can credit, and I know that there are people in the organization who are really happy with the job Bobby King, the linebackers coach, did, and deservedly so. You can credit coaching. You can credit a lot of things, foresight from Vic Fangio, development. But really, this isn't going to happen with every guy that comes into the Eagles organization and plays linebacker. Zack Baun just inherently had what it took and developed and had the ability to be like a sponge and absorb and learn from whatever mistakes he was making in OTAs in the early days of camp and just grow and grow. And each week, Mike, you remember week 2, right? Against the Falcons. That was not a good game for him. He kept getting cut blocked by the guard, the right guard, whose name is escaping right now. Good player for the Falcons, Pro Bowl right guard. He kept getting cut blocked, and you saw him on his feet, and the run defense really struggled. Well, tell me when you saw that happen again. You didn't. So great example of a guy.
And that was after he had like an all. We were like, did the Eagles find an all pro? And nobody told us. Like in that first game of the year down in
Green Bay in Sao Paulo,
Brazil, right? He was unbelievable that night.
Right, and it was like that can't be real. And then week 2, you saw the flaws exposed, and you're like, okay, that's a little bit more like it. But then week 3, week 4, and then of course after the bye week, they played the Jaguars. I think it was. I want to say week 7, and Greg Cosell really made a note of this, and people should go back and check out that Inside the Tape with Greg Cosell after the Jaguars game. We highlighted it. We went through the all-22. First play of the game was sort of a 3-level flood concept on the right side where they tried to get Evan Ingram open in the Eagles zone, and he would have been. I mean, the play call was a good call. Nobody could have expected, not even Trevor Lawrence, that Baun was going to be able to key and diagnose where he was supposed to be in the depth that he had to take his drop to be able to disrupt that pass to Evan Ingram, because it was a play action. He should have been biting against the run. But that right there was such an eye-opening play. Like, this guy is making the kind of play that 6-7-year linebackers make, all pro, like a Fred Warner or a Roquan Smith. For Zach Baun to be making that play, 7 weeks into his first year playing the position, just showed you the accelerated growth and his mindset and ability to just understand the game fundamentally.
Yeah, well, and the interception he made in the Super Bowl is another great example of him just making an unbelievable play based on instincts and what he was taught and what he studied that week.
Yeah, if you think about the interior level of the Eagles defense, not just the talent, not just the dynamic athletic ability, but the instincts. Cooper DeJean's instinct playing zone in Iowa and understanding zone in Vic Fangio's defense, Nakobe Dean understanding it, Zach Baun understanding it, and then you would have either Blankenship or many times C.J. Gardner-Johnson kind of coming down. He's played in similar defenses before. Those guys, I forget who said it, Mike, but someone was I read it somewhere. Somebody analyzed the Eagles defense leading up to the Super Bowl and said, I think it was Cliff Kingsbury on Radio Row, said it was the most elite level spacing he had ever seen on defense. Just guys understanding exactly where to be and when to be there.
Well, it's one of the reasons why Geoff Mosher, I know he's not a free agent or anything, but I would not move Cooper DeJean out of that nickel spot. I think, that what you just said is something that is hard to find. They haven't been able to find a nickel. They have gone through a billion of them. Maddox hadn't been able to stay healthy, and when he played, he was okay. But they haven't been able to find a nickel.
I would say Maddox was a pretty good nickel the first 3 years of his career. They went to the Super Bowl. I think he was the nickel at the time, right? But you're right. He has fallen off in the last 2 years. And it would make all the sense in the world to keep Cooper there.
Right. And it goes to something I think we talked about on Monday is, them paying a running back and a linebacker, are they kind of, does it kind of dispel the notion of what positions and the value that they're worth? If you just have a good player there, you can change that narrative.
You could, and I'm very curious to see in the coming days when Zach Baun's contract becomes available to look at where the money is. It's only a 3-year deal, so it's not. I mean, I'm sure it comes with, the standard number of dummy years that are attached to help you spread out some money. But it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of that money was in the first 1 or 2 years, because I don't know if the Eagles really want to be, paying a lot, backloading a contract for a guy who only had one great season.
Well, that was the other thing, is that he only had the one big year. Is there any concern that was a 1-year wonder type of player?
Oh, I mean, sure. If you look at the websites that are sort of cap oriented and try their best to project contracts for players, it was all over the map. Like, PFF had him at $15 million a year. One site had him at 11. One site had him at 8. One site had him at 17.5. Sam Finkel does great work for us, had him between 11 and 13.5, I think it was. So, and again, it's 17 now, but let's see what the contract looks like when all is said and done.
All right, Geoff Mosher, you were not on yesterday when Saquon Barkley signed, so let's get your football at 4 opinion on that deal. And, geez, I mean, $41 million 2-year extension. And I want to get, I liken it to, okay, there was a lot of people texting in that said, why did you do this? Why did you go to him now? Because a couple years ago, Hassan Reddick had 18.5 sacks. That's the best year you're ever getting out of him. The Eagles recognized that was the best year you're ever getting out of him, and they said, do it again, and he didn't. And then they traded him. You're not getting a better year out of 2,000 yards. I have a hard time seeing that Barkley has a better year in him. If he does it, God bless it, I'm wrong. I'll take that one. But are you surprised that they did this?
Not really, because I might have talked about it with you. I know we spoke about it on the podcast and with our Patreon members. When you get that much production out of a guy on a contract that, it was high market value for running backs, but still lower than what like corners and wide receivers and edge rushers make. And he becomes one of the main reasons for your success and gets you there. It only makes sense. Plus he didn't, to my knowledge, go to management and try to force the issue in it. And this is another contract that I sort of want to see, Mike, how the structure is, because it's very possible that all they really did was guarantee money that wasn't guaranteed in year 2 and year 3. And he's going to be on the team next year anyway. And certainly, even if he gets hurt next year, he's going to be on the team for the next 2 years, just based on what he did this year alone. So it might be one of those things that looks a lot more fancy than it actually is, but I don't know. So I don't want to comment on it until I see the contract, but it doesn't really surprise me.
What we know from the Eagles generally is they're not just they're very good at what they do. They find loyalty, yada, yada. I would have to imagine both these deals help them out in some capacity.
You mean as far as how the general public and players will look at the Eagles organization?
Well, not only that, yes, that's been discussed a lot, is, hey, look, they take care of their players, but I'm talking about with helping them out with the cap and that kind of stuff.
That's why I'm curious to see. I mean, I don't know for Baun. I mean, he's got to get the $34 million guaranteed somehow over the years. So, it's either spread out over a long time and you're going to be, paying him potentially when he's not on the team, which the Eagles will do, or that's one of those deals that you get the payment out early. Like you take the big cap hits now and then next year, so that when it's time to extend Jalen Carter and Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, you're not having a high cap number for Baun. So we'll see. Again, I don't know. And the same thing with Barkley. If they're just guaranteeing money that he was probably going to see anyway over the second and third year of his deal and then spreading it out with a few more dummy years, then it helps the cap, but it may not be like it more helps with rollover space and cap space. The Eagles are a cash team more than the cap team anyway.
According to Jeremy Fowler, by the way, the Eagles' priority was always Baun. The feeling in league circles is that Milton Williams and Josh Sweat will both hit free agency. But do you now feel that those two and or Becton, that there's a better seeing all this happen? Do you feel that there's a better shot that 1, 2, 3, none are back here?
Yeah, hard to say. I would think that all three are at least going to make it to free agency before as far as that, what you see with Baun, where he gets an extension before it begins. Becton's an interesting one. They should have an idea of what the market is going to be for him already. So maybe if it's not as bountiful, maybe you see Becton agree before the free agent period. But when you're talking about pass rushers, like especially a young one like Milton Williams, and a productive one like Josh Sweat, you tend to think that the money is going to be there, and you're going to want your guy to at least get into that market and see if teams start, spending the big money.
It's Football at 4. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. I know you probably had to do an emergency Barkley podcast and now maybe an emergency Baun. Baun is back with the Birds, and so is Barkley. Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. Thanks, man.
Love your alliteration, Mike. Keep it up. Take care.
All right, brother. He's back on Monday when free agency begins, and we're breaking that all down here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget, when we come back, it's another edition of Nick's Nuggets. Nick Earnshaw has all the nuggets of today's big news. Baun, Barkley, Bryce. Phils are getting smoked today. They were down 12-0 last I saw. Although Josh informs me that Cody Clements made a nice play at first base. So they got that going for him.
Listen, you can always appreciate when the guy gets some playing time, makes a good play.
Flashing the leather at 1B. Well, I mean, Bryce Harper said he would go to the outfield, so.
Well, at least you got a backup first
To
baseman.
which, I got this text message a little while ago. This one's from Al in Vineland. Says, Harper doesn't want to play the outfield. He's just trying to sound like a good teammate.
I don't agree with that sentiment. I feel like Harper doesn't say something like that to a guy like Ken Rosenthal if he's just saying it for the sake of saying. Because if he was saying that, he would say it to all the reporters, right? He would have said it in front of all the beat guys, like Todd Zolecki, who joined you last hour.
Well, and Zolecki was on and said, yes, he has no problem batting second. He has no problem moving to the outfield either. So I think they would be kind of tied together. Jeff in Ocean City chimes in, says, Eagles had 3 home playoff games, a ton of merch sales. They're sitting on a boatload of cash. They're ready to ask fans for season ticket money. Very perceptive, Jeff. Although I don't think home game playoffs go to the team.
So the way it
Because that was a big conversation with the Rams who got displaced and had to play that game in Arizona. And there was like, well, they don't exactly – the home team doesn't exactly get the gate for the playoff games.
They don't get the gate, but the concession money, the parking money, there still is that there.
All right, coming up, Knicks Nuggets, don't go away. Earnshaw's here with the Nuggets on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. Stick around tonight for my Bet365 play of the day. We'll have that coming up at 5:45. Rothstein next hour for Rye or Sigh. Right now, it's another edition of Nick's Nuggets. Nick Earnshaw is host of the Shift podcast, which I saw on my feed last night. He is also producer of The Locker Room, weekends on 97.3 ESPN. He's the do-it-all, the Swiss Army knife, and he's host of Nick's Nuggets right now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. A lot of Nuggets potentially today. Maybe a 5-pack, 6-pack. What do we got?
Well, it depends, because we might get in depth on a few of these nuggets. We might not get to 4 or 5 nuggets today. I got a ton written down. It just depends how much time we have to get to all of them, because the first one, it might be the most obvious nugget of the day. You've been talking about it. You led your show with it. You've talked about it throughout your show. I mean, this Bryce Harper thing in the outfield, if you thought I wasn't going to bring this up for nugget number one, now you must be mistaken, because I brought this up months and months ago, Mike, about Bryce in first base. And now, here's the thing, right? With Bryce, he moved to first and knocked Rhys Hoskins off. It kicked him essentially off the roster. They didn't bring him back after his injury-plagued season. He goes to the Brewers. Okay, fine. But then it left 2 holes in the outfield. It left left field open, and it left center field open to platoon. And they still really haven't figured it out. You don't know what you're going to get out of Max Kepler. Marsh is in center. Rojas is Rojas. So you have 2 problems out there. With Bryce, this thing coming up with Ken Rosenthal, him reporting it. You have Pete Alonso's name in the mix when he was a free agent. He ultimately re-signed with the Mets, but his name came up and potentially talking with Boris and the Phillies, and Bryce and him share an agent. He may have moved to the outfield. Now, those discussions probably didn't go anywhere, but then there's also the rumors about Vlad Guerrero and him being a free agent next year, and would Bryce move back to the outfield? I think Bryce should have moved back to the outfield when he came back from his injuries, honestly. So I think that was a mistake the organization made, because it opened up 2 positions for them to have trouble at. And, you lost your right-handed bat, Rhys Hoskins, and I know he had a bad year last year and wasn't great, but in Philadelphia, he might have had a better year. So I'm glad this discussion is now coming to the forefront and could possibly be in motion at some point. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year. I like Bryce in the outfield, and it shores them up. Now, with guys coming off the books, it might change that, but we'll see. But I'm glad this discussion finally was reignited today.
Well, listen, I think Bryce Harper going to the outfield potentially gives you some flexibility at least. Now, at the trade deadline, you can say, hey, we have a move that we can make. We can get a guy like Vlad Guerrero. The one interesting piece that Ken Rosenthal gave an example of was, how about the possibility that they could have gone out and got Pete Alonso this year? The Rhys Hoskins thing, that doesn't excite me all that much in hindsight. I get it, because I think he would have been a good right-handed bat in the middle of the lineup here, but he did not have a good year with the Brewers. So in hindsight, maybe it's not the move, but could you have gone out and got Pete Alonso this year and hit him in the number 4 spot in this lineup? Oh, that's a different story all of a sudden. But is Bryce Harper at the deadline going to say, guys, if you can make a trade, I'll go play left field, and, boom, that changes the dynamics of things?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can move Cassie to left, and you move Harper to right, and then you only have the one problem in center field.
I think you got to keep. I think you keep Castellanos in right. I think Bryce goes and plays. Look, Castellanos, he is a good average outfielder. He has gotten better out there, but you don't want to mess with him. Harper is a guy who has played center field. I'm sure he can play left field. And you put the guy who you trust a little bit more. Bryce Harper's the guy that went from right field to first base. He's been a catcher before in his past. This guy's an athlete. He can play all over. So I put Bryce in left. I keep Castellanos in right. And then, you might have to put Rojas in center just to keep those guys, company out there and flag down he would be like Kelly Leak in Bad News Bears, Rojas between that outfield out there. But if that means you could get a Vlad Guerrero at the deadline, now my ears are perked up.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. If you get a Vlad Guerrero on this roster, it'd be fantastic. And listen, it's not taking away anything Bryce Harper's done. The fact he transitioned to first base and has been really good, Gold Glove level talent at first. He's been great. It's not that. It's the dynamics of the team and the way the roster is constructed. That's why I think it would benefit the team for him to move to the outfield, because then you could bring a guy in like a Vlad Guerrero. You could have kept a Rhys Hoskins. I think it messed up the dynamics of the roster and of the lineup. So that was my point back in October when we talked about it at the end of the season. I even got to ask, and there is a new episode of The Shift out, but a few months around that time, I got to ask Kevin Stocker about that. And it made him think a little bit like, yeah, him moving to first base messed with the dynamics of this team and the roster construction and messed with the lineup a little bit. But he's been so good there. It hasn't been as prevalent of as a conversation because he's transitioned well. He's played really good defense. But it opened up holes in the outfield that you wouldn't have had if he stayed out there.
Listen, I didn't disagree with you the first time you brought it up. I think they probably, because you could have found somebody serviceable to play first base and hit right-handed. That is definitely was an easier proposition than obviously they have not had luck trying to find a right-handed outfielder, corner outfielder. That has not. I don't know why they didn't go out and get. I would have liked to have seen them go get Grichuk, from Arizona.
Yeah,
I think he ended up signing. He's a guy who can hit 15 to 18 homers. He mashes left-handed pitching. He could have been in a platoon with a Marsh or something. That's the guy that I think they missed out on.
Yeah, I think they missed out on a couple of guys. You remember me who eventually re-signed with the A's in the offseason and signed an extension was Rooker. Remember those Rooker rumors were flying around. Mason Miller around the deadline.
Rooker ended up not getting traded to anybody, and he signed an extension there. So they must have been asking exorbitant.
A lot.
I would have liked Rooker too, but it's obvious that they weren't all that willing to trade him. That to me is a pipe dream.
Yeah, I think they were probably asking way too much. Same with Mason Miller. They're probably asking way too much out there in Oakland. Well, they're not in Oakland anymore. They're just the Athletics now because they're playing at a AAA stadium, but that's neither here nor there. They were probably asking way too much for those players. But, yeah, I mean, there were some names out there. I mean, Austin Hayes, not a name that I expected them to go after last year, and then they go out and get Max Kepler. Listen, I hope Max Kepler proves me wrong. I want Max Kepler to have a big year because they need a lot of talent out of that outfield spot, and they need guys to step up out there because Yohan Rojas has been almost an automatic out. It's like you hear like during the offseason, he was hitting well in fall ball and winter ball and all this. He's, hitting great, and then he's hitting great when they set him down, and then when he gets to the big leagues, he's not the same player. He's not hitting 300. He's not hitting home runs. He just is an automatic out. Even though the glove is so good, you have to platoon him, and then you have the hole in left field. Are you going to put Marsh out there? Is Kepler going to play? Like, it just created all these issues, and this is where the Phillies are at right now. But if he moves to the outfield, and you're maybe able to go get a first baseman, a Vlad Guerrero, who is not apparently re-signing with the Blue Jays at this point, I mean, that would be a massive deal if the Phillies can go get a Vlad Guerrero because he's young, he's got power, and you fit him right into this lineup. That would be dangerous if they can get him.
Yep. And listen, the Rojas thing, he's not here for offense. We got to stop hoping that he can handle himself offensively. He's not here to hit 300. He's not here to hit home runs. If he can get on base, steal a couple bases, bat ninth, and play the outfield and not be an automatic out. That's what you're hoping for. Now, he's been hurt, so he hasn't played center field so far. We know he can play center field. You don't want him playing every day, though. But if you were able to get a corner outfielder like a Bryce Harper or somebody else that could play left field and he was platooning in center field, I think you feel a little bit better about that situation because if you're platooning him, that means the other guy hopefully is the offensive threat. He's the defensive threat. And then in a situation where you have to hit for him, that becomes that. But again, I always say, if you're relying on your 9-hole hitter for offense, you got a problem. You're not relying on your 9-hole hitter for offense. That guy's generally there because he's either a defensive stalwart or he does something really, well. He's great at offense. He's got speed that he puts pressure on teams on defense. So, look, if you can find a guy to play first base now at the trade deadline, that opens up a whole nother option for you. Look, here's the other thing you got to consider, though. Rhys Hoskins was a terrible first baseman. Bryce Harper is a very good first baseman. So you would possibly be losing him as I don't want to say gold glover, but potentially like a gold glove level first baseman. Yeah. He's really good over there, which Hoskins was not.
Yeah, and listen, I'd take the hit on defense if it meant they got a bat in here. I don't mind that at all. If they could contribute to this lineup offensively, I'll take a Rhys Hoskins level first baseman out there because Rhys Hoskins was brutal playing first base defensively. And Bryce, that's what I mean. Bryce has been great. Bryce has been a great fielder over at first base. He's diving into stands, making catches, all this type of stuff. He's been great over there at first. So it's not the issue. It's just the dynamics of the team is what I had an issue with when it happened. And then going back to Rojas, they've been teaching him, trying to teach him how to bunt for 3 years now, and it just hasn't worked out. So they have a hole out there in the outfield, and it moves me to this my nugget number 2, and it moves me along to Ranger Suarez. And Ranger Suarez, after the game yesterday, was asked about spending his entire career with the Philadelphia Phillies. And he said, quote, "This is my childhood club. All I think about is staying here." And, this is a big deal, Mike, because Ranger Suarez in the last year of his contract, they signed Luzardo, who, by the way, gave up 3 straight home runs on 3 straight pitches while Rob Thompson was being interviewed on the broadcast. So that was wild to see that today. But not great for the better than the 2011 pitching staff club that you and I are in. But that was Luzardo today. It's spring training. Who cares? But going back to Ranger, it's interesting with what his future is going to be in Philadelphia because I look at him as a trade chip this deadline. I really do. They went out and signed Luzardo. They went out and re-signed Christopher Sanchez during the year last year. 2 lefties. That makes one of your lefties expendable in Ranger Suarez with Andrew Painter waiting in the wings to get into this rotation. So to me, I'm very curious to see what happens with Ranger. We all love Ranger. He closed out the 2022 NLCS to send the Phillies to a World Series. He's been a very good Philly, a very nice surprise. And he's been here forever. My problem is with Ranger is he was not healthy last year towards the end, pitched well in the postseason, gave you all he had, but he is expendable at the deadline. And you and I have talked about this before. He could be somebody you can move to get a bat, and that could go in with the trade of maybe moving Bryce to the outfield and getting a first baseman in here. So as much as it hurts me, it pains me to see him say that. It's his childhood club. He wants to be here. I still think Ranger's expendable.
I've been saying it all throughout this season. When they announced that Painter would pitch come summertime, that tells me that if they think Painter is ready and he's ready to jump into that spot, that we can use Suarez as a trade possibility. Why? He hasn't signed a contract. He is a free agent. What happens? I said this is a unique situation where 2 contending teams could be trade partners. You don't see 2 contenders trade with each other. You usually see a contender trade with a team that's out of contention, and then they're trying to unload free agents who aren't going to go back there, and then they give them to you, and you give them a young prospect. But in this situation, could the Phillies have a Ranger Suarez and a contending team like the Blue Jays or something says, well, we have a free agent. We can't come to agreement. We'll give you our guy. You give us your guy. And because we might need more pitching than we need offense, something to that effect. So you might have a contending team that needs a pitcher, and the Phillies might say, we have pitching, and we're a contending team. We need offense. So it opens up more possibilities to trade Suarez, and that is why I think the Phillies were a little quiet in their offseason here. They could have tried to add this. I think they said, look, we have this possibility in our back pocket. We'll go with what we have. Let's see if this team will give them another half a year to show us what they can do offensively. Maybe we shake up, put Turner at the top of the lineup. Maybe we do this. But if we can't figure that we have enough protection for Harper by the trade deadline, maybe Suarez is the guy that we move.
Yeah, and listen, he's got Scott Boras as his agent now. He's going to command a ton of money in the offseason. I'd love to re-sign him, but they have a great pitching staff already. They have guys locked up, Nola, Wheeler, Luzardo, Sanchez. They're good. They're good. He's expendable at this point with Painter winning the wings. And I'm just going to say, Taijuan Walker, Velo's been up a little bit during the spring. Can always throw him in the mix too and move on from Ranger Suarez, because then you have Taijuan Walker as well if you need some guy to eat innings. Because when you get to the postseason, it's going to go four deep anyway. You're going to go Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, and then either Luzardo or Ranger anyway. So that is why Ranger is expendable. It just, I don't think he resigns here. I don't want to put any.
I don't want to put any bet eggs in the Taiwan Walker basket at all. I don't want to.
I'm just saying. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just throwing it out there.
And I'm refuting it immediately. I don't want to have to put him out there every fifth day and listen to the whole nonsense again. By the way, you wouldn't have to do that. You have Andrew Painter here. He would be the fifth guy. Now, in case somebody got hurt, yes, I think Walker's around. Listen, people texting in about you got to trade. Nobody's taking that contract on. Nobody. He's owed $20 million this year and then again 18. I think it's $18 million this year and again next year. It's not the kind of deal that someone's just like, yeah, throw it our way. He hasn't been any good, and he gets paid way too much money. I had said this. If he is the long man on this team, and he goes out and throws like 2 innings at a time and like pitches well, maybe at the deadline someone says, hey, we are desperate for pitching. I don't even see that happening.
No.
Nobody wants that deal. You can't get anybody to take that deal.
No, they would be like, all right, move on from Taiwan Walker. If I'm a GM, if I'm a president of baseball operations, I'd be like, give me Ranger. Taiwan Walker, it's a conversation ender right there with Taiwan Walker. Okay. With that contract and the way he's pitched miserably the past couple of years. No, Ranger is the guy you trade at the deadline if it comes to it. So with Bryce Harper now, maybe, getting on board, moving back to the outfield, opens a lot of things up for the Philadelphia Phillies. And Mike, 2-pack of nuggets. I told you we were going to get in depth today. So we got to save a couple of these nuggets for tomorrow.
Wow, no Zack Baun. I thought you'd be excited.
I had it for 3. I had a Myles Garrett tie-in, and we ran out of time.
All right, that's today's Nuggets here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. We'll do them again tomorrow. Nick Earnshaw with today's edition of Nick's Nuggets. Thanks, man.
All right, Mike, I'll talk to you.
All right, there you go. Today's Nuggets on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and live video streaming on the X platform at Mike Gill Show on YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe, hit the like button, and, of course, you could be a part of the show. A lot of ways to do it. Text 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Get your text messages in for next hour on the Sports Bash. It's Ryan Rothstein joins me as we go through all the top stories. Holy moly, Zack Baun, 3 years, $51 million. He's back with the Birds, as is Saquon Barkley. And what about Bryce Harper at first base? We're talking about it here on the Sports Bash.
number one most important free agent for the Eagles to bring back, because unlike the other positions, they don't really have another guy waiting in the wings to take his spot. Even Nakobe Dean is coming off of a very serious injury. Actually gets me excited to see what he can do in year 2 with Vic Fangio on this Eagles defense.
That was Ross Tucker, host of the Ross Tucker podcast. I agree. This was the guy, Zach Baun, that I would have targeted. I was saying it all along that that's the guy I would have targeted. That's the guy that I definitely would have put all my, I don't want to say eggs in the basket, but that's the guy that I definitely would have said, hey, let's go get this guy here. Ryan Rothstein's back for another edition or Rye or Sigh. I don't know what's going on with this right now. I'm trying to put you in the video, and it is not working. Something new happened on this video thing today, and it is all messed up. I'll try to figure it out, but I can hear you. I can see you. Oh, there you are. I don't know how that happened all of a sudden. There you are. For those of you watching the live video, I apologize, but let's get another edition of Rye or Sigh. What's up, man?
Yeah, it's fine. No one wants to see my ugly mug anyway, dude.
They had this new feature on the video. I don't know what's going on. I must have hit something by accident because there's like a new feature, and maybe I hit it by accident, and it's been doing this all day.
All right. Well, we made it, man. We arrived. So, yeah, listen, I've caught some of, football at 4, and obviously the news today is Baun, dude, and I'm surprised. I don't want to say I'm shocked because this is obviously a guy that was a defensive player of the year candidate. He was unbelievable. He was unbelievable in the postseason and all year long. But I start with this question to you, and I'm not a full-blown sigh with this here, MG, but what's changed with the Howie approach to things as it relates to the linebacker position and as it relates to Zach Baun? Because for me, I love Baun. Happy he's back. Not a lot of priorities, as we discussed over the past couple of days for this Eagles team this offseason, but you back up the Brinks truck for this dude, 4th highest paid linebacker now. It's not like a Howie typical thing. I'm surprised. What do you think changed as far as his approach, if anything?
It's a good question. I think, he has made mistakes, as we know, so much so that people wanted him gone. They hated him. People wanted him out because of the mistakes he made. Primarily, there was 2 really ones that kind of irked people. When you make a mistake at a skill position player, you really get dragged through the mud. Jalen Reagor, when when Justin Jefferson was there, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and, DK Metcalf was people wanted, said, hey, it doesn't help when there's a guy available that gets taken after you pick a guy. That guy goes on to excel. Your guy stinks. So in back-to-back drafts, he had big skill position misses, and that kind of hung with him for a while. He had other misses too. Andre Dillard did not work out for the Philadelphia Eagles. So he had a couple of high-profile first-round pick. Dillard was. First-round pick, Reagor was. And when you miss on first-round picks, that puts you in a little bit of a hole. So he obviously studied why he was making mistakes in the draft, right? And started to, for whatever reason, maybe he took more insight from people, or maybe he kind of looked for something different. I don't know how to explain how he all of a sudden got better at drafting. What I would say is people were killing him for missing in the draft a lot. He was missing high in the draft, but he was finding guys later in the draft. That doesn't get you a lot of points, though. So what he also did was when he made mistakes with Dillard, guy like Andre Dillard, he lucked out because in that same draft he got Mailata. When he missed on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Jalen Reagor, he ended up putting draft capital again into Devontae Smith. Then he goes and trades for A.J. Brown. So I think a lot of times he learned from mistakes that he made and then was able to fix them with people, with guys that, that he trusted more.
But, he hasn't made those types of mistakes in a while, knock on wood. And my question, just to reiterate, it was more about the linebacker position and his approach to the linebacker position, right? Like the Eagles have not paid, I don't know how long it's been, but the Eagles have not paid a linebacker of this type of contract of this magnitude, in quite some time, and that's my sort of scratching my head, like what changed with Howie as far as deciding to say, you know what, we're going to make this guy who's been a journeyman his whole career before this year, we're going to make him the 4th highest guy at this position on the planet.
The linebacker thing, right. They paid a running back yesterday. They paid a linebacker today. So pigs are flying out there. I know it's pouring rain outside, but somewhere the pigs are flying with the rain. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, but they found someone, and this is an interesting thing because it's going to come up, I think, with Cooper DeJean, too, because Cooper DeJean plays a position that you generally don't pay a lot of money to, nickel cornerback. Do they move him to the outside? Do they value him to keep him in the corner? And if they do keep him at nickel, do they pay him enough to be able to keep him to stay here? Or does another team say, hey, we'll let you move outside? Eventually, this is down the road.
Yeah.
But did the Eagles finally say, look, running back, we put money into that position, and it led us to a Super Bowl. Let's do it again and show you that we value that spot. Linebacker, we didn't put a lot of capital there, but the last time we made a Super Bowl is because we had a really good linebacker. We let him get out the door. We're not doing that again with TJ Edwards.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm happy. Like I think the overall thought is okay to be excited and happy, and there's no reason to feel anything else. But for me, I'm just trying to look at it. Okay, what's the devil's advocate thought here? And for me, it's like, 1 year sample size seems like a little bit of a risk to say, you know what, we're going to make this guy a top 4 guy at this position. I feel like also there was maybe a guy that they could have gotten on the cheap. And, you know, I don't know if that's foolish to even think that way, but I just sort of, I wonder what made him do this.
Well, and listen, I think one of the things we've talked about throughout the day is that the Eagles, Kevin Clark said something. We played this way back in the 2 o'clock hour. And his comment, which was kind of interesting, he says, that we have put too much focus on positional value. This is Kevin Clark from ESPN.
We have a proof of concept of what the Eagles look like without Saquon Barkley. When everybody wanted to fire Nick Sirianni, including me, Saquon changed the entire franchise. And we get so wrapped up in positional value. The Eagles don't care. The Lions don't care. Like, they'll go out and spend real resources on a running back because they understand how teams are built. The Eagles understand how to build a team.
I think that's what, hopefully, the messaging becomes is, are you a good player on our team? I don't care what position you play. Are you a good player on our team? And if that's the case, we might have to now value your position differently than the league does. You know why? Because we're better than everybody else in the league.
And I think he said something there that I want to highlight. They know how to build a team. So just to go against my thought process so far in this conversation, they paid the running back, they paid the linebacker, back-to-back days, Mike Gill. But that was after they already built the team. Right? Like, they had Saquon when their offensive line's intact, when they have the 2 wide receivers, when they have the quarterback. They signed the linebacker when they have studs up front in Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and they have young guns in the back in Coop and Quinion, right? So that's where you say, okay, it makes sense because they built their team prioritizing it the right way, and that's why they gave these guys the contract at these positions.
Yeah, and listen, when they let TJ Edwards walk, we talked to Mosher about this earlier. He said he thinks they regretted that. Like, looking back, they kind of regret it. That was an $8 million deal that he got from the Bears, and they said, look, we just can't pay that for that position. Well, you talk about the mistakes that Howie learned from is, I wasn't willing to pay that kind of money for that position, and it burned us. And now I can't let this guy walk out the door. He's here. He's our guy. I feel comfortable with him. And let's do it. Let's make this guy happy because he's a big part of what we do. And I think there's a part of Howie that says, in my philosophy in the draft is you build up front with the defensive line, the offensive line, edge rushers. So I don't want to have to draft a linebacker. If I don't have to draft a linebacker for the next couple of years, okay, great. I mean, they'll take one in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round to try to get somebody to groom when Baun is done. But this year, 32, he doesn't want to have to take a linebacker to replace Zack Baun. No. So I think that played into it as well.
And you have a guy in Nakobe Dean who you sort of drafted in a buy low. Hopefully you get him at a higher value type of deal. And I think that's been the case. A little bit injury concerns with Dean, but he's been overall great. And hopefully he's that young guy that you pair alongside Zack Baun.
If he can come back from that injury, you have those two. They played all year together. You put them back there, and you have your pairing for the next 2 to 3 seasons here.
It's unbelievable. So moving on with Myles Garrett, you just sort of wonder, where's the money? Like, where's the money coming from? You pay Saquon, you pay Baun, and you still seem to be the front runner for Myles Garrett. Like, where's the money? It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
This is where, again, we go back to Howie gets a lot of the credit. And listen, I'm no Howie hater, never have been. But Lori gets a lot of credit for writing the $36 million check up front, for writing the $34 million check up front. He gets that credit because he's got to go to Lori and say, hey, you got to pay these guys these big signing bonuses. And Lori says, okay, I'll do it. So I think that can't be, when it's Howie and Lori together, because a lot of the things that they can do is based on the fact that Lori is willing to do it. If Howie Roseman is the GM in Cincinnati, he can't go to Mike Brown and say, I need a $36 million check, because Mike Brown's saying, figure out another way. And that's why the Bengals are perennial losers. Teams that don't have the leadership and the ownership to say, I will spend the money up front so that you can get this deal done. That's why the Eagles win in terms of the salary cap game. They don't always win. They don't always win Super Bowls. They have 2 in 8 years. They've been to a third.
Yeah.
And it's because of Mr. Lori and Roseman as a tandem.
Yeah, it's been special, man. It really has. All right, let's go to the baseball diamond, and we're not going to get into the 3 straight homers on 3 straight pitches they gave up today. Did you see that while Topper was on an interview, by the way, on ESPN?
I did. I saw that there were 3 straight pitches, and he basically didn't even acknowledge them.
No, which is so Rob Thompson. But I want to get to Bryce Harper. There was some news, and I know we have some audio with Ken Rosenthal we can possibly queue up if we have it ready on your side of the fence there. But a couple of things that Rosenthal pointed out as it relates to Bryce Harper. One, news on Harper being willing to move back to outfield from first base. And Rosenthal said, or I should say, Rosenthal outlined what would potentially cause that move for Bryce Harper and how realistic it is. So if you have it ready, here's Ken Rosenthal on Harper and his potential move.
Yes, he is willing to go back to the outfield, perfectly willing. He has no preference. And his thought is, if the Phillies can get a first baseman who is a difference-making kind of player, then he would definitely do it and gladly do it.
Yeah, so, I saw this and I'm sort of scratching my head as well with this. Like, okay, listen, we know Bryce Harper's willing to do whatever for this team, right? Like, I don't know what we make of all of this. Is this a surprise to you?
Well, I think there are people that think that Bryce Harper is unwilling to do things for the team.
How?
Well, I got people texting in when we played that audio earlier that said, Bryce is just saying that he won't go to the outfield. There's a lot of people that think he doesn't want to leave the number 3 hole to go hit number 2, that he only wants to hit number 3. I think there's a lot of people that have that same sentiment, that he is unwilling to not hit third to help the team out. Now, he has said that he will, but will he do it when the time? I think he would play the outfield. Now, I think this stems a lot from, there's a lot of people out there that from that World Series run wanted Rhys Hoskins back. And they feel that Harper said, I want to play first base, and that prevented the Phillies from bringing Hoskins back, because if Harper would have told the team, I'll play the outfield so we can bring Hoskins back, I think a lot of people look at that moment as he was not willing to do that. He wanted to play first base, and that's why Hoskins isn't here.
But now my memory is eluding me here a little bit. Didn't Harper play a little bit of first base, though, when Hoskins was still with the team for whatever reason, like a game here or there?
No, if you remember, Hoskins got hurt in spring training.
Right.
And that was the year where Harper wasn't ready to start the season because of his elbow. He had that elbow injury, so he didn't come back. It was sometime in like June or July he came back from that elbow injury, and Hoskins had already been out for the year.
Okay.
But yeah, it was the next year. So Hoskins was going to come back last year. The Phillies did not bring him. So Harper had played half the season at first base because Hoskins was injured.
Right. That's what I'm referring to, yeah.
Yeah, but Hoskins was injured, so he was out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when Harper moved to first base originally. Well, then last offseason, Hoskins was looking to sign back in Philadelphia, and Harper basically went to play first base. Many people thought he could have said to ownership, I'll stay in the outfield if you want to bring Hoskins back. They did not do that, and Hoskins signed with the Brewers.
Yeah, I think that's insanity to put that on Harper, though, right? I mean, Harper could have done that, but, the team also could have came to Bryce and said, hey, if we're looking to bring, Reese back, are you willing to do X, Y, and Z, right? So I think Harper's shown that he's willing to do whatever.
But I think the way it was kind of presented was almost like Hoskins prefers to play first base. Not like, I'll do whatever it takes. If you want to bring Harper, if you want to bring Hoskins back, I'll go play the outfield. Because the other part of that was, where was he going to play in the outfield? Because you had Castellanos in right, which is where Harper had played. Was he willing to go over and play left field, which is a position he has not played I don't know that he's ever played. I know he played center. I don't know how much left he's played. So that was another whole part of this thing is, okay, if I go to the outfield, where am I going?
Who would you rather have, Castellanos or Hoskins?
Oh, man, that's a tough. Hoskins did not have a good year last year. I know he's coming off the ACL. He did have 26 homers, which was more than Castellanos, but his batting average, and when he was here, one of the big things for Hoskins was he had a high on-base percentage, which is why the Phillies constantly hit him in the 2-hole, which I hate it.
Yeah, me too.
He did not have a good on-base last year. He did not have a high batting average. I think he hit like 210, 215, somewhere in that range. I think his on-base percentage was like the low 300s, like 305, somewhere in that range. But he did hit 26 homers, which is more than Castellanos. So now it was only 3 more than Castellanos. The question is, would you rather have Hoskins at first base with a 25 to 30 home run power?
Right.
And Harper playing right field, or Castellanos in right field there? That's a good question. They both Hoskins, are low on. They're both low on. Well, Hoskins is a high on base percentage guy, usually.
Right.
And he walks a lot. Something Castellanos does not do at all. He doesn't walk a lick.
No.
You know what? Big picture, I might rather have Hoskins at first and Harper in right. The one problem with that is Hoskins was a horrendous first baseman.
Bingo. That's what I was trying to work in, is we were just looking at it offensively. Offensively, personally, I would rather have Hoskins, but let's all not forget how horrific Hoskins was at first base, to the point where I think that's why they ended up parting ways with him, was those mistakes in the field. They were terrible.
He was really bad at first base. No way. And listen, I was never the biggest Hoskins guy. He did kind of, I don't want to say win me over, but I did respect him a little bit in that playoff run. Yeah. He came up in clutch situations, but he did go ice cold in the World Series. But he carried them in the Braves series. He was unbelievable in this Braves-Padres. That run when they went to the World Series, he was a huge part of that. But I felt like he was a little too streaky. He did get on base. He was a higher on-base percentage guy than Castellanos, no question about it.
Yeah, I would combat it with everyone's been streaky for the Phillies. At one point or another, that's been their problem, right? And you can also say that's baseball, but everyone's been so up and down.
Well, yeah, and Hoskins, look, when the one thing I couldn't stand here, and the question would have been, when he was with the Phillies, the 6 years he was in Philadelphia, he had a 350 on-base percentage. Pretty good. They hit him in the 2-hole. And that was when Kapler was here. I was going to say Kepler. Kapler was the manager, and he was very analytical, so they liked his on-base percentage, and they put him in the 2-hole. I was never a big fan of that because, he was a power guy and they didn't have any power on that team. He had 34, 29, 27, 30 homers. He had 26 last year. So if you would have had him that year when he came back last year, could he have been the power bat to hit behind Harper? Would they have moved him to the 4-hole and let him hit 4? Because you would have had Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Hoskins. And is that the right-handed bat they've constantly been short?
And then you have Baun, batting 5th or 6th. All of a sudden the pieces fall into place a little bit more organically as far as the lineup is concerned. And you factor in the homegrown factor. fan favorite factor, how he performed in the playoffs, to your point, right? Like, you can look back on this and say, man, the organization has been outstanding, but that could be a fatal mistake that they made for whatever reason.
Yep. Listen, you're right, too. Like, did Hoskins look? He's coming off ACL, didn't play at all. He goes to a new team and everything, and maybe he just didn't feel comfortable. He still hit 26 homers. He had 82 RBI. The one number that was really low for him was his on-base percentage. It was 303 last year. His batting average was 214. So those numbers not great. But,
yeah,
he could have been a better option. The Castellanos, to me, is just put it this way.
He's a bonehead, dude. He is the dumbest guy at the plate I've ever seen, okay? And I've seen myself.
Me too.
Yeah.
He's definitely aloof. He's definitely aloof, Castellanos. I will say this. When they signed Castellanos, I was very excited, and I have not been nearly. I have not got the ROI that I thought I was getting with Nick Castellanos. And I know he had a solid second half of the year last year, but even with that, he had less homers. He played all 162 last year. Rhys Hoskins played 131 games. So Hoskins played 30 games less. He had more homers last year, and he had 4 less RBI than Castellanos did in playing all 162 games. Now, Castellanos hit 254 to 214 for Hoskins, but his on-base was 311. They're basically last year were the same player, and Hoskins played less games, and he had more homers and 4 less RBIs. You could make a strong argument that Hoskins is the better value out of those two.
And Hoskins was on a lesser team in a lesser lineup, which favors Hoskins.
I mean, Milwaukee's a playoff team. Yes, maybe they're a little lesser than Philadelphia. Yeah,
Right.
but, I mean, he's still in a good lineup. I mean, good
Sure.
team, good lineup. But coming off of an injury, too. You got to keep that in mind. Hoskins was.
Yeah, right. It's crazy. Real quick before we take our first time out, we started this with Rosenthal saying, if they land a first base, like, who would they even land?
Well, I think the one thing that he brought up, he gave a specific example. This is who he explained was a possibility. Take a listen.
So he's there for now, but the scenario he mentioned during the offseason was if there was a chance the Phillies could have gotten Pete Alonso toward the end, then maybe at that point, sure, he would have moved back.
So if you could have got Pete Alonso this offseason, remember, he was a free agent deep into the thing. Did the Phillies say, Pete Alonso, come play first base? We're going to move Bryce Harper to left field. By the way, Bryce Harper has played 194 games in left field, so he does have plenty of outfield experience over a season worth. He could have played left. You could have had Castellanos in right, and there's Pete Alonso, bang, playing first base. Was that something that could have been a possibility? Now, you asked the other question, who was even available? At the trade deadline, keep in mind, Vlad Guerrero is going to be a free agent. If the Blue Jays can't sign him, can you be a player for a player like Vlad Guerrero?
Man, I would love that, but I would imagine that would take a haul. Maybe not.
I'm sure it would. I mean, but you have to start thinking, okay, do we want Vlad Guerrero? Would they take an Aiden Miller or a Justin Crawford, or would you have to give up both of those guys? You probably don't want to give up Painter. So that it would be definitely tricky.
And let's look at the future a little bit here as well. Like the Phillies farm, who do they have from within? Who have they grown and developed from within right now in their current roster? It's like it's slim pickings, and they're going to mortgage some more, young assets. That's tricky.
Yep. Well, it's Bryson Stott, it's Alec Bowman. That's about all the young guys that they actually have kind of brought in here by themselves. All right, Sports Bash Live. That is segment 1 in the books. We got another Wise, Rye, or Sigh segment coming up for you here on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN. What else is happening out there? Well, stick around and find out. Zack Baun signs a big new deal. He is back with the Eagles, 3 years, $51 million for Zack Baun. What do you guys think about that signing? Surprised? And who should they target next? 609-403-0973. I'm Mike Gill, and this is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe, like, and listen. 5:32 Sports Bash. We'll have tickets for the MAC. We'll be giving away all next week here on the Sports Bash. We'll have details coming up on how you can win some tickets. We got some cool things coming up with the MAC basketball championship game coming to Boardwalk Hall. I'll actually be calling the game on the national call on national radio at Boardwalk Hall on Saturday night, but I'm going to be there Friday night. Now, the same thing happened here. I don't know what happened. How did you get there you go. Now you're back. I don't know how that keeps happening. I'll be there Friday night for the semis for sure. I don't know when else I'm going to be able to get over there, but you got to get out there. You got to get out to some games. Don't let this tournament get out of Atlantic City. Do that for me, my friends. Get to Boardwalk Hall for multiple games. Do not let the tournament leave Atlantic City. If the people do not come out this year, next year is the last year for the tournament at Boardwalk Hall. For all the people who bemoan that Atlantic City can't get anything right, this is something they get right. This tournament is awesome. It's fun. Watching basketball at Boardwalk Hall, it's like going to the Palestra almost. I mean, it's like one of those places where every seat is so awesome. You're in this old historic building, and there's not a bad seat in that place. It's high-level basketball. It's a great family night out. I get it. Atlantic City can't get out of its own way half the time. But this is something they get right. Get over to a game at the tournament. Get over to 2 games. Get over to multiple games. Friday night, they got the doubleheader for the semis, and then Saturday is the championship game. The championship game is 7:30 on Saturday night. I wish that game was in the afternoon. I think it would do better, but who am I to say? It's all television-based.
Yeah, I thought it was in the afternoon previous years, but you're right, man.
It was a couple years ago, and the place was pretty packed. It was Monmouth against
Siena?
They played St. Peter's.
St. Peter, yeah, it was the St. Peter's year.
St. Peter's went on that run. They won that game. It was a 3:30 in the afternoon game. The place was pretty packed. I remember there was a line out the door waiting to get in that place.
It was awesome, and you're right. I mean, anytime you can watch any sporting event at Boardwalk Hall, it's special. It's special. So shame on anybody listening who hasn't gotten out there, and get out there this year, to your point. All right, MG, I want to get back to the Eagles. We opened up last segment, obviously talking Zack Baun, but I want to look ahead because I think this is interesting to the draft. Now, both of us have commented that, man, the Eagles don't have a whole lot of needs. I'm going to give you my 1 or 2 positions that I think Howie and the Eagles should focus on in the draft, and then I want your thoughts. Tight end, Goddard has missed time. He's not getting any younger. They had a contingency plan when Zach Ertz was here by bringing in Dallas Goedert. I think they need to do the same. I think now's a great time to bring in a young talent that you feel like can be the next guy when it's time to move on from Goddard. And how about running back? Right? Like, God forbid Barkley goes down and you don't bring back Gainwell, right? Like that running back room is not the best in the world.
They drafted Will Shipley last year. They like him. We'll see if he replaces Gainwell. Gainwell is a free agent. Do they bring Gainwell back? I think, from what I understand, Gainwell is very well respected. He's very close with Jalen Hurts. They drafted him. They like him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he got a deal to come back here and he was the backup again. But if not, they did draft Shipley. And running back's a spot where you can take a guy in the 5th round. They do have three fifth-round picks. I think it's 3, maybe even 4. I could be wrong. I think it's 3 or 4 fifth-round picks this year. So I think they can address that in the draft, but they did draft Shipley last year. He showed some flashes. He's a guy that can catch the ball. The tight end one, though, I think you're right. I think tight end is a spot where they will address in the draft. We had Saratella on yesterday, and he talked about the combine. The tight end spot's pretty loaded. Good year to need a tight end, and I wouldn't be surprised. This happened a couple of years ago, if you remember. The Eagles had 32 the year they won the Super Bowl. They had 32 the next year. They traded out of that pick with Baltimore. Baltimore drafted Lamar Jackson, and the Eagles drafted Dallas Goedert.
Right, there you go. Yeah, I forgot they did that. And there is some, rumors that they're going to do that same exact thing and, get a tight end possibly early in the second round, which I think would be a good move. I also think wide receiver would be a position. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think wide receiver also, you look at the depth there outside of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith.
Yeah, well, listen, they brought Dotson in last year, and he's back here again. And I thought Dotson, progressed as the year went on, especially in the playoffs. He made some big plays. Now that he has a full offseason here, does he a bigger part of the offense? But, yeah, I like they did draft Aniyah Smith last year too, so they have him kind of lurking as well. I think the areas where they focus on in the draft, let's just say they keep all their picks where they are. I think you're looking at now – let's assume that the 3 free agents all are out the door.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 big ones, right?
Yeah.
Becton, Milton Williams,
yeah,
Josh Sweat. 32, it's an either edge rusher or defensive tackle with 32.
Okay.
In the second round, it's whoever you didn't take in the first round, edge rusher or defensive tackle. And then when you get to that third round, I think you start to look at tight end. You start to go down that road. Now, you don't want to draft for need. You want to go best available, but I think the Eagles feel comfortable taking best available defensive tackle and edge rusher at that spot. And this is a team, they have Tyler Steen. I think they plug him in at right guard and then probably draft another guy to be that swing. He's the swing guard. The other guy's the swing tackle. Last year, they drafted a couple offensive linemen as well that, were on the practice squad for most of the year, that those guys are hanging around too. Boy, it is pouring outside, by the way.
Yeah, it is teeming out. Absolutely teeming. This also could be a year where Howie says, let's try and look for a guy that's dropped and you steal, right? And they've been doing that almost every year, at least over the past 3-4 drafts. So that's going to be something fun to keep an eye on for the Eagles. All right, I want to switch to draft talk, but
let me ask you a question on that, because yesterday Rick Saratella yesterday brought up that very possibility. He said the kid from Tennessee, whose name is escaping me here, Josh, who is the defensive tackle from Tennessee. Saratella said that he could drop to 32 because he has a lot of off-the-field problems. With knowing what we know about the Eagles and the character and the culture of this team, do you want to bring a bad dude in?
How bad we talking?
Well, according to Saratella yesterday, he said when he elected, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name here. When he foregoed his senior season, that the people in Tennessee were celebrating that he decided to leave.
Okay, interesting. Don't love that, but like I just said, I think this is the year where if you feel like you're getting a guy at 32 that has top 10 potential, let's say, yeah, take a chance. If he's going to work anywhere, wouldn't you say it's probably going to be in Philly?
Now, mind you, when they drafted Jalen Carter, he had off the field questions, and for the most part, I think he's been pretty good in terms of his off the field stuff.
Well, that's why I asked how bad we talking, because it's so overblown every year with so many guys about the air quote off the field issues, and they end up being dramatic and overblown and false.
I saw a mock draft, James Pierre Jr., that's the guy. I saw a mock draft. Yeah, I'm looking at the mock draft now. So Jordan Reed's mock draft, he had at pick 32, he had Pierre Jr. going to the Eagles at 32, and, that's basically a drop. That's him dropping to 32 because of his off-the-field. James Pierce Jr., that would be the guy that he would have fell there because he essentially is not a great human being.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't know if he's the guy, but I think my overall answer to your question is, yeah, I think this year you have the ability to take a chance like that.
He's an edge rusher, by the way, not a tackle. He would be an edge guy that replaces Josh Sweat. So you're looking at a guy who would be probably a dynamic player playing him next to a guy like, Jalen Carter. Hey, I'll play you next to Jalen Carter. Anybody getting a chance to play next to Jalen Carter is going to be going to be pretty happy about that. Now, in the second round, interestingly enough, he has the Eagles taking an offensive tackle, which, I wouldn't be shocked if they went that direction because of Lane Johnson's age. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they went with a defensive tackle there.
I'd be a little surprised if they went offensive tackle because I also think that's a sweet spot to take best available if you're the Eagles this year in that second round. And I also think there's more important needs. I think tight end is a legitimate area they need to address in the draft. So
no doubt.
That is, you get in that second round sweet spot, you're going to have some good options there. So I think that should be an area of focus. Absolutely.
Not sighing at that. I definitely am on your side there. If you can get a tight end, and it's a good tight end class. There's a tight end, Taylor Warren from Penn State. You're probably looking at a top 5 player. Now, I don't know if he's going to get drafted in the top 5, but that's a guy that if I'm not saying he's going to fall to 32 or anywhere because he would be a beast mode. Like, Saratello yesterday was comparing him to the impact that what's his name in Oakland had this year, or not Oakland, Vegas. Brock Bowers.
There you go, Bowers. Yeah, man.
I know that he was on my fantasy team this year. That's how my brain is just forgetting names now. I'm starting to get to that point in my life.
Yeah, it's not good, man. It's not good.
No.
You bring up Warren from Penn State. There's a chance he might play both ways. I don't think he's going to play both ways, but that's being discussed. If he were to play both ways, real quick, we can end on this. What's more difficult, both ways in the NFL?
Well, no, you're talking about Hunter.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What did I say?
You said Warren from Penn State.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was like, wait a second. Did I miss that he plays another position?
Yeah.
Did you ever seen the video of when Gronk, they played a trick on Gronk and they brought up like a tight end that plays for the Dallas Cowboys and they just totally made a guy up?
No, I didn't
Michael
see it.
Strahan's like, hey, Steve Johnson, when he's back at tight end, he's a weapon for Dallas. And Gronk just is like, I never heard of this guy. What am I supposed to say? Like, and he just like totally goes with it. But that was about what was about to happen there. I'm like, wait a second. Did you say Tyler Warren playing both sides of the ball? I'm like, that I don't remember happening.
Yeah, no, it happened, man. You just must have missed it.
You're talking about Travis Hunter.
Yeah, Travis Hunter from Penn State. Do you think it's more impressive both ways, NFL or what Ohtani in Major League Baseball?
That's a good question. I'm going to say, I'm less impressed. I feel like more guys could do what Ohtani does. They're just not allowed.
At that level, though?
Yeah, I think like if they stuck with it, though, that's the problem. They just get shut down. Like, you get to a point where you're just not allowed to hit anymore when you're a pitcher or when you're, you know what I'm saying? Like, they just don't let you do it anymore. I think that there are more guys that have, like, the ability to probably throw an inning or two. Now, Ohtani, the fact that he's a Cy Young level starter. Now, not to say that other guys, like, there's probably more guys in the NFL that they played both ways at some point in their life, and that somebody told them you can't do it anymore. So I don't know which one's more impressive. This is what I know. I know Ohtani does it at a higher level, and he's the best there is as a hitter, and he's one of the best there is as a pitcher. So I guess the fact that he's top 10 probably at both. He's number 1 hitting. I don't think he's a number 1 pitcher, but he's top 10.
Absolutely.
I don't know if Travis Hunter, where he falls on both. Is he a top number 1A wide receiver, and is he a shutdown corner in the NFL? I don't know that yet. So I think right now I'm going to go with Ohtani.
Yeah, I wish, to your point, that they just allowed more guys to do that. I think in our culture, in this day and age, it's not going to happen because, to your point, kids stop playing both ways in baseball in high school. It's insane.
Yeah, right now, essentially, there's kids right now that are POs. They pitch, and that's it. When it's their day, they don't hit. They get DH'd for. When I played high school, my team was so bad that I think as our coach felt bad for us. So, back in the day, Holy Spirit, you either played offense or defense. I don't know that they do that anymore. But the year that I played, our coach was like, our team stinks. You're only playing one side of the ball. You can't play both. There was a way to get, I think, more people playing time.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think more people, I think, are good enough to do both, but they get told you have to pick one or the other. I do think that is possible. And we were talking about this morning. I was on Birds 365 with McMullen, to which we asked, like, could Moro Ajomo play more snaps or, something to that effect? And, like, I'm always mesmerized by the fact that, like, when I grew up, like, Reggie White never came off the field. Like, he didn't just rotate with somebody. He played every snap. Like, I'm not, like, impressed by the fact that somebody plays every snap. That's what I expect from you. You're one of the best. Like, if you are an elite player, you're not coming off the field ever.
No, I know, but that has become impressive now.
That's what's sad.
It is sad, right? Same like Saquon or the running back position. It's like, oh, this guy is 26. He's old as dirt. It's like, come on, dude. Like,
well, he had 345 carries this year. The year that DeMarco Murray had 395 carries, he had 1,800 yards, and then he basically was a broken down car on the side of the road the very next season. We worried 345 carries that Barkley goes from 2,000 to 1,000.
I don't know. I mean, should we be worried if he drops to only over 1,000 yards? Number one. Number two, if that were to happen, I don't think it's because of too many carries last year. Like, I just don't think that has an impact on certain guys. Like Saquon, I trust. He's a beast.
All right, Sports Bass Live, 97.3 ESPN. That's today's Rye or Sigh. We'll do it again tomorrow. Thanks, man.
Later, man.
All right, we'll come back. We'll do the Birds, the Bet365 play of the day coming up next. All right, time for the Bet365 play of the day. I gave you 2 plays last night, Josh. How'd we do?
Last night, Mike, you split the difference. You got the Raptors won outright. Knicks couldn't keep up with the Warriors. Overall, now you are 120, 83, and 1.
120, 83, and 1. I'll take that record. You'll take that record, and you'll take these 2 picks tonight. I like Oklahoma City and Houston in the over in that one. OKC Thunder, Houston over is my play in that particular game there. OKC, Houston. They're playing the Houston. They're playing the Grizzlies tonight. Sorry. OKC Grizzlies over 252. The other game is Detroit. I like the Pistons tonight, -4.5 against the Clippers. And that is my Bet365 plays of the day. You heard the record. 120,
83, and 1.
120, 83, and 1.
This
Close.
rain's a little distracting.
I got distracted by the lights flashing in here. You see a little blink?
Yeah.
Mr. Marbles? There a ghost in here or what? That'll do it for me. We got game night up next, followed by nothing. Everybody's off tonight. No
Netflix?
Sixers, no Flyers. Yeah, what am I watching now? I'm watching a show. I'm still on that 0 Day.
Nice. With
Been
Robert
watching
De Niro,
0
right?
Day. Yeah, Robert De Niro, president. Pretty good. Not bad.
I'm halfway through that show Paradise on Hulu with it's about the president, the Secret Service guy.
Every show is about a president, an FBI, a CIA, all that stuff.
James Marsden does a pretty good job playing the president in this show, I got to admit.
I don't buy that Robert De Niro was the president, though.
Don't buy that 1 minute?
No, he's tough to believe as De Niro was the president. All right, I'm back tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody. See ya.